I love you, my angel, Torak murmured, pressing a kiss to the top of her head as the scent of her shampoo filled his senses, soft and familiar. Raine's arms tightened around him. She didn't know how to respond to his confession, so she simply held him closer. Torak stroked her back in return. He didn't dare squeeze any tighter, afraid he might hurt her. He hadn't said it expecting to hear the words back. He said it because she needed to know just how much she meant to him. Raine had a habit of thinking too little of herself, and that was something Torak was determined to change. Alpha. Jack's voice suddenly echoed through his mind, trying to mind-link him. Torak didn't move, still holding Raine in his lap. What is it? Miss Seraphina is back, Jack replied quickly. She's furious. She found out I took Luna out from under her protection to meet you. She's on her way here right now. Jack's ears were still ringing from Seraphina's shouting through the phone. After that call, he was seriously considering whether curses could travel through a signal. An angry which was not something anyone wanted to deal with. Torak rested his chin on Raine's head and answered calmly. Let her come. Not far away. Jack glanced uneasily at the 5 Lycans who had followed Torak up to this point. Was this about to turn into a show of force? Inside the car, Torak shifted slightly to look down at Raine. My love, I want you to stay in the car, he said gently. No matter what you hear, don't get out until I say so, all right? What's happening? Raine lifted her head, her big obsidian eyes searching his face. Seraphina is coming. She wants to have a little talk with me, Torak explained, giving her a small smile. She's not very happy that you came to see me. I shouldn't have come, Raine whispered, guilt creeping into her expression. Seraphina already warned me. Torak tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. If you hadn't come to me, I would have gone to you, he said simply. One way or another, we were going to meet. With Raine, his usual overwhelming alpha presence seemed to fade, leaving him strangely relaxed, indifferent to anyone who wasn't her. Will she scold you? Raine asked, fumbling for the right word. Torak chuckled softly. I think she'll try, but she knows when to stop before she crosses my line. As he spoke, he caught Seraphina's scent on the wind. She was close. She's here, he told Raine, feeling her body go tense. Everything will be fine, my love. Trust me. He kissed the tip of her nose, then gently let her go. Stay here. Torak stepped out of the car and immediately sent a command through the link. Stay inside the car, Jack. Yes, Alpha, came the quick reply. In the distance, a red Chevrolet came roaring toward him at reckless speed. From the way it was being driven, anyone could tell the driver was furious. The car screeched to a halt just a few steps in front of Torak. The 5 Lycans instantly moved, forming a line between their alpha and the vehicle, snarls ripping from their throats. A few humans nearby glanced over and then looked away, oddly uninterested, as if the near collision hadn't happened right in front of them. Seraphina's work, no doubt. The car door flew open and a woman climbed out, slamming it hard enough to make the frame shudder. Short, curly, fiery red hair framed her face, and her bright lime-green eyes locked onto Torak with open hostility. She didn't spare the Lycans more than a glance, ignoring their warning growls as she marched forward. I told you to stay away from her, Seraphina shouted, only stopping when one of the Lycans stepped in front of her, lips peeling back to reveal sharp canines. Oh, please, Seraphina snapped, sounding both annoyed and amused. You can't be serious. She flicked her hand. The Lycan went flying, thrown aside as if some invisible force had yanked him off his feet. He crashed to the ground several meters away, rolled, and came up crouched, ready to launch himself at the witch, his eyes blazing red with rage. Stop! Torak's voice thundered through the mental link, freezing the Lycan in place. The order echoed even in Jack's mind, making him flinch. Inside the car, Raine leaned toward Jack with a frown. Are you hurt? She asked. Jack shook his head and forced a reassuring smile. I'm fine. There weren't many witches who could casually knock back an enraged Lycan. But Seraphina was not just any witch. She was far more dangerous than she looked. Outside, the 5 Lycans whimpered low in their throats and stepped back, though their eyes never left Seraphina. Every muscle in their body stayed coiled, ready. Smart choice, Seraphina said coolly, satisfied, even though she couldn't hear the mind link. Now, if you came just to tell me to stay away from my mate, you can save your breath, Torak cut in, his tone turning icy. She had warned him before not to see Raine for a while, but Torak had never agreed. Seraphina had simply decided his silence meant consent. Do you really not understand why you can't be near her? Seraphina hissed, taking another step forward. Which part of my explanation didn't you get? Which part of your conditions is being broken right now? Torak shot back. She's not in my territory. I've been away from her for days. She's under your supervision. Seraphina had said that because Raine's spirit was still weak, being around Torak and other Lycans for too long would drain her and worsen her condition. But Seraphina had taken Raine out of his territory, and aside from the Lycans and werewolves who had come with him, there were hardly any others around. She had no real ground to stand on now. I told you she needs to focus on her training. Seraphina gritted out, glaring daggers at him. You shadowing her every step and calling her every chance you get does not help. Torak narrowed his eyes. What exactly are you trying to do, Seraphina? Are you trying to separate us? Do you want the truth? Seraphina crossed her arms over her chest. The gesture made her look both dangerous and striking, all fiery hair and sharp angles and attitude. You and your precious mate Bond can go straight to hell, she sneered. In an instant, Torak's eyes went pitch black. You have no idea what hell looks like, which he said in a low, lethal voice. Seraphina was completely out of line if she thought she could lecture Torak about hell. She seemed to have forgotten that long ago, the three Donovan brothers had already dragged hell into this realm themselves. If anyone understood horror and despair, it was him. That was something she should have kept in mind before throwing that word in his face. Seraphina clenched her jaw, unable to find a sharp enough reply. Her eyes, however, said everything. She was furious, and she still completely disagreed with Torak's need to stay as close to his mate as possible. Yes, it was a mate bond, but Raine didn't feel what Torak felt. And unlike a normal bond, this one seemed to only work one way. Torak needed time to be sure that Raine would come to love him back. Why did you come to help me? Torak asked quietly, his eyes still the color of a stormy night. You're the one who sent someone to look for me, Seraphina replied flatly. It was true that Torak had sent James after her, but that had been for a different purpose entirely. I didn't invite you here so you could interfere between me and my mate, Torak said coldly, his gaze sliding for a second toward the car, confirming Raine was still inside. Interfere? Seraphina let out a humorless laugh. Did you forget I'm the one who dragged your pathetic mate out of a coma? A deep growl ripped from Torak's chest at the insult. In the next second, he half-shifted and lunged at her. His hand grew, claws extending from his fingers as he brought it down toward her head. Seraphina threw her arms up and chanted under her breath in a language only witches knew. His claws shredded the fabric of her sleeve, but her skin remained untouched. When she lowered her arms, her eyes blazed. How dare you attack me? Torak dropped his hand, his fingers returning to normal. You should have expected that the moment you disrespected my mate, he said, voice ice cold. And you know I'm immune to your curses. His eyes flicked to her hands as she subtly tried to cast another spell. Damn you, Seraphina snapped, furious, then shot a hateful glare at the 5 Lycans in wolf form snarling nearby, baring their fangs. Tell me, Seraphina, what's your real agenda? Torak refused to let this go. He wasn't about to let anyone, even a witch he had known for decades, endanger his mate. Seraphina stayed silent this time. You vanished for years and suddenly reappeared a week ago, volunteering to help, Torak continued. That's not like you. He knew her well. Seraphina never lifted a finger unless there was something in it for her. Yet here she was, personally training Raine and helping her awaken her natural powers. Something about that didn't add up. Did someone order you to do this? Torak pressed on. Otherwise, you'd never offer to help Raine on your own. The more he spoke, the more certain he became. You don't need to know that, Seraphina snapped back. All you need to know is that I don't mean her any harm. You won't go near my mate again until you tell me who's behind you, Torak warned, his voice final. He turned away and started toward the car. But when he looked up, The car was gone. His blood boiled. Seraphina! His roar shook the air as his white fur burst forth, covering his body. He stayed in human shape, but the Lycan within had fully taken over. I didn't want to do this, Torak, but I had to. You need to understand. Seraphina's disembodied voice echoed through the parking lot. There weren't many people around, and the few who were nearby seemed completely oblivious to the furious creature in the middle of the path and the unseen voice shouting around them. Give me back my mate, or I will rip you apart. Torak didn't care about the humans or Seraphina's attempts at reasoning. The only thing that mattered was that his mate was gone from where he'd left her, and he hated that more than anything. Shift back and talk to me, Seraphina called, staying hidden. She knew better than to show herself in front of him like this. Torak didn't listen. He lifted his head, closed his eyes, and drew in a deep breath, letting his instincts take over as he searched for Raine's scent. I wouldn't have gone through all this trouble to bring her here if I wanted her dead. She'd already be gone if I hadn't helped her before. Seraphina shouted, frustrated. Torak was completely out of his mind if he really believed she was trying to kill Raine. If she had wanted Raine dead, she simply wouldn't have shown up at the hospital at all. Torak blocked her out. He focused everything on his senses, on the one scent that mattered. Seraphina could keep talking as much as she wanted. It wouldn't change anything. He would not forgive her for hiding his mate. All of a sudden, his head snapped to the left. With a blur of movement, he lunged toward a blue car. It wasn't the car he was after, but the person behind it. In a flash, he caught Seraphina by the throat and slammed her back against a different car. The sound of metal groaning under the force echoed in the lot as his grip tightened. His growl was low and deadly. Seraphina's eyes widened. She hadn't expected him to pinpoint her so quickly. She had layered herself in magic, but this Lycan was annoyingly resistant to it. He shouldn't have been able to sense her at all, and yet here they were. She tried to push him off with a spell, her hands glowing as she reinforced her neck, but her magic wavered under the sheer strength of his rage. Her protective charm flickered, and her lungs began to burn. Torak, you're going to kill me. Seraphina choked out, trying to snap him back to reason. Get a hold of yourself. But Torak's wolf had taken control, and he had no intention of reining it in. Both man and beast were united in one instinct. Find their mate. Give me back my mate, he roared, squeezing harder, red flooding his eyes as his sanity slipped. Let me go first. Seraphina gasped. Her voice was weaker now. Her face flushed a dangerous shade as she fought for air. My mate. The command in his voice was so powerful that the 5 Lycans dropped their heads, pressing their snouts to the ground in submission. It had been foolish of Seraphina to think she could negotiate with Torak while he was like this. An alpha who had unleashed his beast wouldn't stop until he got what he wanted. Her hands, still wrapped around his wrist to keep him from snapping her neck, glowed with a dull yellow light. Let go, she stammered, then released one hand and made a sweeping motion. Seraphina finally abandoned her stubbornness. Behind Torak, Raine appeared, sitting on the ground, disoriented. She looked around in confusion until her obsidian eyes landed on Torak strangling Seraphina. Raine gasped, clapping both hands over her mouth to stifle the sound. That tiny, choked noise and the sudden rush of her scent cut through Torak's fury. His grip slackened. He turned his head and saw her, wide-eyed and trembling, while Jack ran toward her from a distance. Torak's eyes burned an even deeper red. He flung Seraphina aside and moved straight to Raine, scooping her up and cradling her against his furred chest possessively before Jack could get close. He held her tightly, lifting her off the ground as if he could fuse her to him and never let anyone separate them again. A deep, warning growl rumbled from his chest, filled with pure rage and protectiveness. Jack froze in place, understanding perfectly. If he valued his life, he wouldn't take another step. Slowly, he backed away, baring his neck in submission to show he meant no harm. Torak, Raine's voice shook as she tried to wriggle a little in his hold. I can't breathe. She was trying to tell him he was hurting her, but Torak wasn't listening yet. The Lycan inside him was still on high alert, scanning for threats, snarls spilling from his lips. A soft whimper broke from Raine as she took in his terrifying appearance. This was the second time she had seen him like this, lost to his rage. At least this time, there was no blood, no corpse on the ground. Once he was certain no one nearby dared to threaten them, his attention shifted fully back to Raine. He let out a low whine and nuzzled the side of her head. His fur receded as he shifted back into his human form, but his eyes remained blood-red. The beast was still very much in control. Raine wrapped her arms around his waist and gently patted his back, trying to calm his harsh breathing. Torak responded with a rough grunt, lowering his forehead to hers and inhaling deeply. "Mine," he murmured into her ear. He held her like that for a while longer, as if reassuring himself she was really there, before finally easing his grip. He set her down, but kept her close, his hands running over her arms and sides, checking for any injuries. "Do you really think I'd hurt her?" Seraphina's irritated voice cut in from behind him. "I just moved her, and you try to kill me for it," she snapped, still rubbing her bruised neck. Without her magic, she was sure it would have been broken. "Who ordered you to do this?" Torak asked, voice low and dangerous, one arm locked tightly around Raine's waist as if she might vanish if he let go. Seraphina exhaled sharply, finally dropping the truth. "The moon goddess, Selene, or whatever name she prefers," she said with clear contempt. "And don't bother asking why I agreed to her request. I won't tell you, not even if you kill me."
Hey everyone, Firescale Audiobooks here. If there's a novel you'd love to hear more of, you can support us on Patreon or Ko-fi. Depending on your tier, I'll make extra parts just for the stories you're most excited about. Usually I can only upload 4 to 5 parts of each novel, but with your support we can go beyond that. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. It helps more than you know.
Torak's eyes dimmed the moment he heard that name. What the moon goddess had planned. Why she has to send Seraphina to guide Raine. Something was wrong with this situation, and more specifically, something had happened to Seraphina. The witch that he knew despised the gods and the goddess, whatever form they took, not to mention to take an order from one of them. She wouldn't very please only to say their name, as if it was something forbidden for her, just like Torak's brother and he himself in the past. Something that Torak thought would never change, but the facts said otherwise. Well, he had changed as well after all. Since he found Raine, he became less hostile with the goddess now. Though he grateful for his mate, but it didn't mean he would oblige her blindly. In spite of that, whatever the situation or the reason that brought Seraphina to cut a deal with the moon goddess, Torak was disinterested to know about that. As long as he had Raine in his arms, he didn't care about why Seraphina accepted Selene's order. "I don't care what you and Selene had planned, but if you hurt my mate, you have to know, I will kill you even when you are already in hell." Torak snarled and hugged Raine protectively. "I have told you many times, Selene didn't send me to kill your mate," she shouted in frustration. "She sent me to guide her to gain her power, which I think very stupid and ridiculous thing to do." Seraphina clearly showed her willingness to do this, but something bound her to obey Selene's order. Torak was skeptical with Seraphina's explanation, but it would be so stupid for the moon goddess to harm the promised mate that she had bestowed upon him since centuries ago. Moreover, just like what Seraphina said, she had many opportunity to kill Raine if she intended to do so. "I will meet my mate every time I think safe enough to see her. So you better drop your charm on my notice, and don't you dare to interfere with my phone call." Torak said it sternly. He made it clear for the witch who was in charge, as he didn't take no for answer. Seraphina mumbled something incoherent as a reply while she rubbed her neck, which Torak's fingers had imprinted there, bruises with the color of purple. "She needs to go back." Seraphina barked and turned toward her red Chevrolet, opened the car door, and slammed it closed. Torak sighed deeply. Seraphina really had gotten on his nerves. "My love." He caressed Raine's cheeks tenderly. "Did I scare you earlier?" That was the important thing that he needed to know. Raine gave some thought about it and nodded her head lightly. "But I know you will not hurt me," she added when Torak's expression turned sad. "No, never," Torak said solemnly, as if that was a vow. Raine smiled on that words. She was still not used with that side of Torak, but she knew he would never hurt her even when he lost himself over his beast. "I will meet you when the time is right." Torak fished out a phone. It was the latest type from his pocket and gave it to Raine. "Tell me if she does something beyond your limit and you feel uncomfortable with it, all right?" Torak knew Seraphina would vent her displeased toward his mate. Though Raine needed her guidance to overcome her fear and unearth her gift, he wouldn't let her take advantage on his mate. Torak hugged her and indulged himself with her intoxicating scent, unwilling to let her go. He wanted to spend his time just like this, feeling her warm and soft body in his safe embrace. However, Seraphina, seemingly so determined to ruin every moment that Torak has with Raine as she punched the horn rapidly. While Torak grunted with frustration, Raine was giggling upon seeing his reaction. Reluctantly, Torak released her from his arms as he gave her a kiss on her forehead. "I love you, my beautiful mate," he said heartily. Even though Raine was only wearing her brown hooded parka and washed-off jeans with her bare face, she would always be the most beautiful girl in Torak's eyes. She was his girl. Torak walked Raine to Seraphina's car and opened the back seat for her while Jack had been sitting behind the wheel and Seraphina sat on the shotgun seat. She covered her neck with scarf and crossed her arms angrily, but didn't say anything. Apparently, Seraphina only brought back Jack and Raine without their car. Thus they must ride Seraphina's car in order to get home. "I will call you." Torak rubbed Raine's head lovingly before he closed the door. On the gunshot seat, Seraphina rolled her eyes upon hearing that. Something bothered her when she heard that kind of sentences, but this time she wisely shut her mouth and swallowed back her sarcastic comment. "Take care of my Luna," Torak whined. Link Jack, who started the engine after the Alpha closed the door. "I will." "Alpha," Jack replied, and drove away with the grumpy Seraphina beside him. On the back seat, Raine turned her head toward Torak's direction until his figure disappeared. A while later, the phone that Torak had given her buzz as a notification appeared on its screen. It was a message from unknown number, it said. "Let me know when you're already at home." Raine smiled brightly when she read the message again and again before she replied with a simple yes. She was going to save the number, but halted when she had to put the name of the contact person. Raine didn't know what to write there. To write plainly his name didn't feel right with her. It seemed Torak was just an acquaintance. She gave some thought about this trivial matter for a few minutes before she came up with a name that represented him so well. Raine saved it and giggled childishly, ignoring Seraphina, who shot her with angry eyes through the rearview mirror. Equals 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 equals. After Torak sent a message to Raine, his phone rung as he received a call from Raphael. "Alpha, Dragon Lord Stefan Magnus has just arrived in your office." Raphael's voice sounded through the phone. "Let him stay there," Torak replied before he hung up the phone. Before, the Earth Dragon shifter, Reynold Magnus, Stefan's older brother, had agreed to transfer all the asset in his possession because of the attack that he had launched in Torak territory and killed his people. By chance, one of the assets under him was in this Fulbright city, so it was only right to call one of the brothers to manage it and be a backup move for Torak to establish his footing in this other creature territory. Afterward, Torak fell forward and shifted into his big white wolf. His fur was like a snow, so delicate and pristine, the opposite depiction of the owner temper. He led the 5 Lycans behind him back to the office building with lightning speed, as there was no human could see them and no other creatures would like to mess with them. Sitting on a bar stool, a lanky man with his curly hair tied on his nape was sipping his drink while watching the scene at the parking lot unfolded before his golden eyes. A lazy smirk crept on his lips. "Procrastinating again?" A sweet voice that laced with impatience sounded from beside the man as a girlish woman in her knee-length tutu white skirt sat on the bar stool. "Don't you ever hear about a proverb that patient is a virtue?" Belphegor gulped down the remaining drink on his glass as he rested his elbow on the table and propped his head with his left fist. Lilith rolled her eyes hard when she heard that from the sloth. "Lucifer will shackle you in the deepest hell if your indolence ruined this again." She watched the man beside her with displeased. Laziness was really a sin, as it was a hard job to team up with the sloth after all. "I like the word indolence. It makes my laziness sound classy." Belphegor chuckled lightly. You should be crowned with another sin. Lilith shook her head incredulously. Craziness. Be careful with what you said. Lucifer will not tolerate your behavior next time. Lilith took a sip of her drink while looking at the direction where Belphegor has been looking at, but could see nothing. Why in rush? Belphegor mumbled. What have you been looking at? Lilith ignored his usual complaint and voiced out her curiosity. Out of the blue, Belphegor was dragging her to have a drink in this bar and demanded to have a view toward the parking lot without giving her a specific reason, and then he went into his lazy mood as he sprawled on the table. Future. Belphegor answered thoughtlessly. Lilith was laughing heartily when she heard the devil's answer. What future do you see? Hell freezes over. Belphegor shrugged, stood up, and stretched out his stiff body. Well, I can arrange that. Let's go. Lilith her arm around his. While Belphegor was standing, it was easier to drag him away. We need to watch the useless female Lycan who hasn't shown any progress. Since I have ripped apart her Lycan's soul, I don't think she is still a Lycan. Belphegor didn't agree with that. Whatever. Lilith flicked her hair from her shoulder and like manner, she didn't want to argue about this thing with the sloth. Equals. When Raine, Seraphina, and Jack arrived at their apartment building, Seraphina held Jack, who was about to enter their flat, by holding his chest firmly. I have something that I need to talk to her. Woman to woman. Seraphina spoke in cold tone. Don't bother us. And she slammed the door right in front of Jack's face and ignored his repeated knocking sound while she turned around and faced Raine. Am I not make myself clear? Seraphina glared at Raine. I have told you to not meet him. She waved her hand at the door, and in an instant the noisy sound that Jack made disappeared. Raine lowered her head and took steps backward, trying to make distance between the two of them. Don't you understand with what I said? Seraphina yelled at her. You don't have a mate bond in you, do you? Seraphina gripped Raine's chin and raised her head so she could look her straight in the eyes. Let me tell you one thing, and let's hope this understanding could clear your narrow mind. Seraphina whispered viciously. Do you know the difference between you and Torak? Raine could sense the hostility that emitted from Seraphina, and she couldn't explain why the witch hated her so much, even since the first time they met in the hospital. If I ask you, you have to answer me. Seraphina shouted, and a few glasses on the table scattered into pieces as they fell on the floor with clattering sound. Raine could feel the air left her lung while she was trying hard to breathe and fighting back her tears. The lamps in the living room flickered by the invincible power as Seraphina kept Raine in her tight grip, waiting for the poor girl to talk. As everything, and Raine stumbled with her words. It was so hard for her to talk, but she knew Seraphina wouldn't stop until she got the answer from her. I have nothing. That was what Raine felt all this time. Since she was together with Torak, her insecurities couldn't be concealed, and she couldn't help but pitted herself. Though your answer is not wrong. Seraphina released the grip on her chin and took a step back to scrutinize Raine, from her head to her toes with eyes that filled with derision. But that is not what I meant. When Raine was feeling dreadful after admitted her insecurities, her phone buzzed with notification. A message from Torak popped up on the screen. My love, are you home yet? Seraphina didn't need to see the content of the message, as she could predict what Torak would ask. What are you crying for? You wanted to bust the door and choke me to death. She asked sarcastically. Raine hastily wiped the tears that almost fell from her eyes as her trembling fingers typed a reply for Torak. Yes. Raine answered with a simple word. She didn't want to talk much as she afraid Torak would know. It didn't take long time for Torak to decide to call her. Raine stared at the phone that flashing in her hand, didn't know whether she has to answer it or not. Why? You don't want to answer his call? Seraphina glanced at the name that Raine had given to Torak in her phone. Don't you want to tell him about what I did to you? That I have made you cry? That you are so weak and easily scared with this little confrontation? Tell him, and let's see how long it will take for him to get here and tear my throat. If something happens to me, that will be your fault. Raine stuttered. I don't. How could Raine bear something like that? And how Seraphina could put her in that position? Raine, of course, didn't want something bad happen to Seraphina. Despite her rude behavior, she had seen it with her own eyes, how Torak had lost control and caused death of other creatures, and also how he almost lost it again earlier. Having someone else death because of her again wasn't something that Raine wanted. It was a nightmare. She still couldn't get rid the image of the man whose head had been crushed by Torak right before her eyes. How she could bring herself to witness that again. There was no guarantee Torak wouldn't do the same when she picked up the phone and a whimper escaped from her lips. There's one thing that you should learn. Serafina, like the villain she is, was trying to make the situation worse for Raine. No matter how he loves you, he is still a beast. He will get what he wants in a beast way. He will not hurt you, but he will kill people around you without batting an eye if he thinks those people endanger you. In the end, you will stand atop of a pile of dead bodies that he kills in the name of protecting you. Raine gulped hard. He will not do that. Her voice barely a whispered as she kept her eyes locked on the flashing phone in her hand. He will not. Serafina raised one of her delicate eyebrows incredulously. He killed his own people, and that was all because of you. To protect you. Because you are too weak to even protect yourself. Serafina stepped forward and pushed Raine's shoulder harshly. The phone clattered on the floor and went silence. So did Raine. Her legs gave away, and she knelt before the witch, who was standing haughtily before her eyes. You don't have capability to stand against me. You don't even have guts to try. The mocking tone in Serafina's voice was palpable. With dozens of creatures out there, wanted your life, don't tell me you were really hoping for Torak to kill them all, because he will end up got killed or death in the process of protecting you. Serafina gave a dramatic shrug as she said that. Have this matter ever crossed your mind? How many creatures that Torak had offended, only by following you here, forcing himself to his enemy's territory, the place which has not welcomed him, just because you don't have the ability to fend yourself. Serafina threw bitter facts right in front of Raine's eyes, forced her to see how her weakness had created so much trouble and endangered Torak's life. The man who cared about her the most, the only person who had showered her with undying love. And now, you don't even have the strength to pick up his phone. Serafina gave her derision, smirked. Pathetic. You better kill yourself before someone got killed because of you or kill for you. The air was very thick as Raine was having hard time to breath. She clutched her chest tightly. It felt like there was 1,000 needles were shot right at her at the same time. Serafina's words were more painful compared to the moment she was still in the mental hospitality when the ward guard kicked her ribcage, and as a result, she had to be hospitalized for a week. However, the most hurting part of Serafina's word was the fact that what she said was true. Every single fact that came out from her mouth wasn't something that Raine could deny. Seeing how much damage that she had done on Raine, psychologically, Serafina turned her back and started to walk away. You have been through so much. Why don't you learn something from it? Serafina glanced at Raine through her shoulder. Learn how to stand up for yourself and stop make other people worry about you. You are not a kid anymore. Stop waiting for someone to save you. The witch's voice was powerful and resolute. Raine was sitting on the floor and startled when Serafina kicked the door of her room closed. She was trembling out of fear and shock. The reality in this world in Serafina's eyes was so hard. The witch saw this world as the stage to survive, while Raine was barely could make it. In the witch's eyes, one will be killed or killed in order to survive. Raine knew about that. However, the way Serafina elaborated it was way too dark, as if spilling blood was a common issue in her eyes. The girl hugged herself in an attempt to stop her body from shaking uncontrollably. She bit her bottom lips so she could stop her teeth from clattering. At that moment, her phone's screen flashing notified her there was someone who was trying to call her. Raine knew who was calling as no one knew this number except Torak. But the problem was what she had to do. If Raine ignored his phone call again, Torak would be suspicious, and there was no guarantee he would not come straight away, just like he had promised her, and she knew what would come next. But if she was about to pick up the phone, would she be able to talk properly with him and assured him that she was all right, though the fact she was in the middle of a mental breakdown? Would she be able to make this right? What she had to say. In the end, what Serafina said was true. She was nothing but a coward who always looked for protection. A weak human. Biting her bottom lips, Raine was trying hard to hold back her tears, and when the phone gave the last ringing tone, she pressed the answer call. Hello? Hello? Raine tried to make her voice as normal as she could. She gripped the phone tightly to suppress her feeling. She can do this. Everything will be all right. There was no reply from the other side of the phone for a few seconds before Torak's suspicious voice sounded. Are you all right? Even through the phone, Torak's dominance nature was oozing off from his voice. Raine nodded. She hummed. I just took a bath. Fortunately, her voice didn't falter. She hoped Torak didn't pick anything wrong with this. Did Serafina make things difficult for you? Torak asked in hard tone. He concerned about this the most. Raine shook her head and a tear fell on her cheek, but she forced herself to smile when she answered him. No, she's in her room. She didn't lie about this. All right. Torak nodded and satisfied. Probably Serafina was too angry to confront Raine again. At least that was what Torak assumed. I will have a meeting with Stefan Magnus, the dragon shifter that we had met last time. I will call you again when I've finished. Raine remembered the dragon shifter. After all the first time she came to their mansion, Stefan had left an impression for her, in bad way. Will you be all right? The moment Raine finished her question, she felt stupid. Of course, Torak would be all right. What bad thing would happen to him? She shouldn't ask that stupid question. However, Torak didn't think that was silly. He was rather happy that Raine concerned about him. Nothing about his mate was ridiculous. I will be all right, my love. The beast purred and satisfied to get a bit of attention from his mate. I will call you back later, okay? Okay. Raine replied softly. I miss you. There was no answer from the other side of the phone. Apparently, Torak was caught out of guard upon hearing Raine's confession. I always feel the same, my love, Torak said. The tenderness in his voice almost made Caleb choked with his drink when he heard that. The Gamma looked at his alpha incredulously. He still couldn't get used to this side of Torak. I will see you soon. Raine nodded. I love you. And with that, the line cut off. Raine kept the phone on her ears, listening to the beeping sound as she wiped her tears and whimpered softly. Well done for your first lie. A voice boomed from beside Raine. Out of the blue, Serafina has been sitting on the sofa in front of the television while tracing her finger on the back of a blue lizard, which sat on her laps docilely. Raine snapped her head at the direction of the voice and saw the witch with her blue lizard. This was the first time she saw this reptile. But don't be too happy with that. Let's see if you really managed to deceive Torak. Serafina had changed her flamboyant dress and was wearing her SCXY nightdress that showed her olive skin. I never meant to deceive him, Raine replied in low voice. She didn't like the word that Serafina used to describe her. Don't get me wrong, it wasn't a bad thing to deceive someone. At least you learn which the thing that you need to let other people see and which the thing that you need to keep for yourself. Serafina shrugged. Her earlier gut-wrenching mood had vanished. I don't want to hide anything from him. Raine frowned. She felt bad for lying to Torak. Oh, you know, the little human. Serafina groaned in frustration. With time, you will learn to hide many things from him, whether you like it or not. You will confront Torak because you have different view from him, and in the end, both of you will be standing on the other side of the bridge because of what you are believe. That's life, girl. Everybody changes. That's the peak of grown up, and it applies to some hearts too. No, Torak and I won't be like that. Raine shook her head, her eyes, once again, brimming with tears. Serafina's lips curved into a vicious smirk. People changes, girl. Situation changes. But I won't. Raine rejected the idea stubbornly. Said the girl who couldn't look at me in the eyes a week ago, but now she is brave enough to talk back to me. Serafina raised her eyebrows with amuse. Great, you are improving. The witch clapped her hand lazily as a mocking gesture toward Raine's naivety, and the lizard climbed her body to sit on her shoulder instead when she stood up and walked back to her room again. Tomorrow your tutor will come. He is a human, so make sure your wolf boyfriend is not around. Seraphina warned her. You better take this seriously this time. No matter what creatures Raine's tutor would be, the appearance of Torak alone would create another unnecessary trouble. In human world, he was in the spotlight because of his breakthrough with his project, and in the other realm, those creatures would start to sniff something suspicious if Torak came to visit Raine. They would grab a hold of his weakness once they knew Raine was Torak's mate. At this point, Raine's existence was a weakness for Torak. Not to mention Raine's life would be more in danger with many attempts to have her as a leverage to make the supreme alpha knelt. Moreover, Seraphina didn't need that now, as the little girl under her surveillance wouldn't be able to bear it. Raine was aware about this too. Seraphina, she called out to the witch before she could enter her room. What? She asked with impatience. The lizard in her shoulder tilted his scaly head. What the difference between me and Torak? Raine raised her head and began to fidget nervously. She wasn't sure if she wanted to hear the answer. You're not yet telling me. See? I told you people change, and you prove it. Seraphina's face beamed triumphantly. Isn't it very obvious? Rather than answer her question, she gave her a question as a reply. Raine's shoulders slumped. The difference between them was indeed very obvious. One could mention all the disparity that exists, and those all existed between Raine and Torak. If what you think about the differences between you and Torak are, he is super rich and you don't even have 1 cent under your possession, or he is strong and you are weak, well, even blind people could see it, or he is handsome and you are... Seraphina tilted her head, assessing the girl who was fretting on the floor. You are not bad, but of course many women will agree with me if I say you are not suitable for him. That was the truth. Ever since Raine was in Torak's office, she could feel the way those women looked at her with degrading eyes. Besides, those statements are true, but my point is not that shallow. Seraphina continued. She leaned her back against the wall behind her, let the lizard slither down her body, and disappeared into Seraphina's room, seemingly too boring to listen both women's conversation. There's the most important thing than all of that. Raine squeezed her hand, giving herself a push to raise her head, so she could look at Seraphina clearly, what that witch wanted to say to her. She rubbed her eyes to get rid of the evidence of her remaining tears as she looked at Seraphina with wary eyes. The big difference of both of you is your mental state. Seraphina somehow was willing to explain. Torak, by any means, he is a destruction. He kills anyone that he doesn't like as he pleased, exterminate them in the most merciless way. He will get whatever he wants in any way, in a dirty or bloody way. And you, Raine's eyes dimmed. She knew Torak was a beast with ferocious side, but the way Seraphina described him as if he didn't have a heart, lack of compassion, something that Raine hardly believed when she remembered the way Torak had been treating her. Seraphina tried to find a suitable word to describe the timid girl in front of her. And you are too pure to be with him. And then she added, pure, in bad way. What do you mean? Raine wasn't sure with what Seraphina wanted to say. Girl, you have been through a lot. But let me ask you a question. Seraphina was squinting her eyes. Will you kill the creature who had killed your parents? Raine gasped with that question. That thought had never crossed her mind. She hated those creatures for killing her parents and made her life become miserable, but if she was given a choice to kill them, she wasn't sure if she would take it. See, Seraphina, once again, made a satisfied smirk. Can you see the difference between you and Torak? You don't even have an ounce of his craziness. If it was him who was giving that question, you know exactly what his answer will be. Raine shook her head, still couldn't see Seraphina's point. But that is not a problem. That is a big problem. Seraphina emphasized her every word. That will be a big problem. No, he will not harm me. Raine refused stubbornly. Of course, Torak will never harm you because you are his mate, but he will kill people around you without hesitation, if he thinks that is for your own good. Seraphina walked closer toward Raine. I am still alive now after what I have done to you, because he sees benefit in me to guide you. But how about the people that he will kill for you? You will go to university, make a friend or two, but I will assure you, you will make enemy also, whether you like it or not, and when Torak saw it as a threat, he will demolish them. At that time, what will you do? He will not do something like that. Oh yes, he will go to that extent. He is not that kind of person. Raine shouted at Seraphina. This was the first time she shouted at someone. Seraphina was surprised by Raine's sudden outburst, but then she chuckled. Oh dear, I have known him for centuries. He is more than capable to do so. No, he will not. Raine was adamant with what she believed. Torak wouldn't do something like that, right? The thing that Seraphina mentioned was going too far. He wasn't a beast, right? Seraphina shrugged her shoulder. The purple color on her neck was glaring viciously under the lamplight. That is only a little example. You will find out the answer of it soon. Very soon, honey. A woman was lying on the bed motionlessly with her blonde hair scattered all over the pillow beneath her. She was so pale as if she was dead. No progress, Lilith drawled, swaying her legs while she was sitting on the table. How long she has been like this? 2 weeks, 3, 4? Belphegor frowned as he was deep in thought. An expression that very rare appeared on his face. Did I kill her when I ripped her soul? He talked to himself. If you really kill her, you can check her in Tartarus. Lilith suggested. No, thanks. The laziness returned on his face as he laid his body on the bed, beside Genevieve. I'm not in good relationship with Hades. You don't even have a good relationship with the other 6 deathly sins, sloth. Lilith mocked him, but the fallen angel seemingly didn't mind with her attitude, or he was too ignorant to be angry with that remark. What kind of guardian angel she is? Belphegor asked the entirely different topic. Who? The girl? Lilith raised her eyebrows. I don't know. She doesn't look like a guardian angel. She is too weak. Yes, agreed with you. But even a constant drop of water could create a crack on the hardest rock. Belphegor contemplated. If you think you can make a move on that girl now, you better think twice. She is with the witch Seraphina now. I have told you to execute the plan when you have a chance, but you slipped the opportunity and incited Lucifer's anger. Lilith complained. Now, with Seraphina around, it is hard to get to her. Belphegor waved his hand lazily at Lilith. It isn't necessary like that. The guardian angel will come to me eventually. Equals 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 equals. The next day, Raine woke up early like usual and prepared breakfast for the 3 of them. Sometime Jack would drop by before he went somewhere to do his duty. Raine didn't know what Jack's job was, but every time she asked, Jack would give her the same answer. Task from Alpha. Jack's status in Torak's pack was a warrior, but it wasn't something to be proud of as Torak has thousands of warriors from both Lycan and Werewolf. Jack didn't hold a specific role in that rank. That was what Jack told Raine. That was why it was such an honor to be able to safeguard Raine, their future Luna. However, Raine didn't feel the same thing. She still couldn't grasp the role of Luna, because all she wanted to do was with Torak, but to be honest, she didn't want to take any role in his pack. Raine was too afraid with confrontation, and apparently, position as Luna required a person with personality who was totally not Raine. Raine was still trying to avoid that kind of topic, because it made her feel uncomfortable. Moreover, Torak had never mentioned anything about that. Neither he pressured Raine to be a Luna's figure for him. Raine was grateful for Torak's understanding and pretended this matter had never existed in the first place. For breakfast this time, Raine simply makes sandwich, 2 for Seraphina and herself, and another 2 for Jack as his appetite was too big for his skinny body. When she had just finished placed the last sandwich on the plate, the doorbell rung. Unhurriedly, Raine washed her hand and wiped it dry before she opened the door. She assumed it was Jack, who would drop by to eat breakfast together. However, it wasn't Jack. In front of the door, Standing a man in his early 30s with spectacles rested on his high nose. His pink lips curved into a handsome smile as his melodic voice sounded into Raine's ears. "Good morning. I am Arrow Knight." He introduced himself as he stretched out a hand for Raine to shake. However, Raine didn't reach his hand as how it's supposed to be done. She only stared at his hand and shifted her eyes on his face with frown. "You must be Raine, right?" Arrow guessed it right. "I will be your tutor from today onward." Raine blinked her eyes. "Oh." That was her only reaction as she gestured for him to come inside the room, without shaking his hand, because she didn't feel right to touch or to be touched by a stranger. Arrow sat in the living room while Raine knocked on Seraphina's door, but there was no answer from inside. She repeated her action, but there was only silence that greeted her back. Where is the witch? Had she left this early morning? When Raine was still in confusion, she heard Seraphina's voice in the living room, talking with Raine's tutor. Abruptly, she walked back to the living room and found Seraphina was conversing with Arrow. She did this magic again. Seraphina was wearing blue jeans that hugged her slender legs with oversized yellow sweater. Her red hair was tied in a loose bun atop of her head. She looked appealing and mature. Raine couldn't blame Arrow as the man wasn't able to avert his eyes from her. "Raine, come here." Seraphina called Raine with her sweet voice that she had never used. "Why don't you introduce yourself to your tutor?" Raine took a seat at the sofa beside Seraphina's. However, before she could sit properly, Seraphina had grabbed her hand and dragged her to sit next to her. "Greet him." Seraphina was still in her lovely tone, but Raine could feel there was an order in her sentence. "Good morning, Mr. Knight," Raine said timidly. "Nice to see you in person, Raine." Arrow gave her his best smile. "I have heard about your case from your sister. I will help you for the next 4 months. Raine frowned. What case that Arrow was talking about? And what Seraphina had told him about her? Raine raised her head and looked at Seraphina, but the witch ignored her as she kept talking with Arrow about Raine's education. Arrow even volunteered to take Raine to the university where he was graduated as a comparison of universities that she would be taken after graduated from high school. But Seraphina turned down Arrow's suggestion because his university was a bit far from where they were living, and it wasn't in the list of the 3 universities that Seraphina had suggested to Raine before. The conversation about this took another 10 minutes before Seraphina offered a breakfast to Arrow. In the end, the 3 of them was having a breakfast together with the sandwiches that Raine had made. It appeared that Jack didn't come for his breakfast this morning. After breakfast, Arrow gave a few books to Raine. By the meaning of few books, there was actually dozens of it. The 3 universities that you want to enter are the top universities in this city. But first you need to find what major that you want to take, and we need to work on your grade to meet their standard. Do you have something in mind? I will help you to choose your major if you have a problem with it. Arrow explained it to Raine as he added a small dictionary from his briefcase. I heard from your sister that you have not been to school since 2 months ago. Raine blinked her obsidian eyes innocently. She was really clueless about the background story that Seraphina had made for her. Raine hummed absent-mindedly as a response. Don't let what had happened bother you. You are a beautiful girl. Arrow patted Raine's shoulder. Bullying will leave trauma, but you have to know that many people are not like them. He squeezed her shoulder encouragingly. Raine squirmed as she wasn't comfortable with his gesture and moved away. She didn't like to be close to him. Raine, why don't you bring your books inside and study? Seraphina smiled at Arrow. I will walk Mr. Knight to the lobby. Raine didn't need to be told twice when she hurriedly hugged all the books and scurried away into her bedroom. Your sister really a timid type of girl, Arrow remarked while looking at Raine, who has just closed her door. He could hear the metal clicking as sign the door was locked. Yes, she is, Seraphina replied curtly as she stood up and walked toward the door. Both of them walked in the hallway and waited for the lift when Seraphina turned to face Arrow with knitted brows. Mr. Knight, she started. Just Arrow, please. Arrow smiled brightly. He liked to hear Seraphina's voice. The younger sister was so timid, while the older sister was eloquent. Such interesting women. Arrow, Seraphina obliged with his request. Yes, Seraphina. Arrow turned to face the beauty beside him. He liked how his name rolled in her tongue. Put your hands off her, my sister. Seraphina kept the sweet tone, but this time it laced with warning. Do not touch her. She was a witch, so she has a witch way to know his true intention. Eros' elegant smile slightly faltered, but he composed himself quickly. I didn't mean that way. And don't talk to her like that way. She has trauma, not a kid. Seraphina made sure her beautiful smile still etched on her lips when she said those words. No, Eros slightly stuttered. If you can't bind to our agreement, you could drop this job. Seraphina shrugged nonchalantly. The way she talked was like someone who was talking about trivial things. On the other hand, Eros was flabbergasted by Seraphina's words. Of course, he didn't want to lose this job, because the income was far greater than his previous one. Eros thought with Seraphina's very welcoming attitude, he could be a little bit closer with one of the sisters. It was a good thing as they looked like coming from a wealthy family. I will not do that again, Eros said in flat tone, a businesslike. Torak was in his new office alone when gust of wind scattered the paper on his table. He squinted his eyes as unpleasant smell invaded his nose. Torak Donovan, a man with eyes that reflected his vicious soul that darker than the night sky and his tan skin that glimmered under the lamplight, was looking at Torak with his golden eyes. A smirk made its way to his pursed lips. Lucifer. Torak greeted the unwelcome guest without a trace of warmth in his voice. He stood up from his seat and strode over toward Lucifer. I don't recall that I welcome you here. His voice was getting colder with every step that he took. Don't worry, I welcome myself. Lucifer slumped his butt on the cozy, dark leather sofa. Torak's office was designed according to his personality, exquisite and impeccable. A huge set of luxurious sofa was set in the middle of the office, where Lucifer was sitting on, with floor-to-the-ceiling glass at the other side of the wall, where he could watch the whole city from there. What do you want? Torak asked icily as he stopped a few meters away from the Satan and poured a glass of whiskey from cellaret for himself. I just want to visit my old friend. Lucifer suddenly appeared beside the Alpha. You don't like to see your old friend? Torak didn't answer that, but his ocean blue eyes dimmed as he blinked. May I? Lucifer took a glass and opened another bottle of bourbon without waiting for Torak's reply. He took a sniff of the scent that emanated from the open bottle. Devil's share. I like it. However, before Lucifer could take a sip of his devil's share, Torak had grabbed his neck and crushed it without a change of expression. He didn't even blink when he snapped Lucifer's neck into two. You are still as rude as centuries ago. Lucifer's voice was sounded from behind Torak. Somehow, he had been sitting on the same dark sofa, which he had sat on a few minutes ago. You have to work on that bad temperament of yours. Torak wasn't a little bit surprised to say the least, as he calmly turned around to face the fallen angel while sipping the whiskey. Get yourself out of here while I still have my patient. Torak nearly growled as he gulped down the remaining liquid in his glass. Lucifer chose to ignore the threat in Torak's voice. I guess a mate is not successful in changing your nature. A vicious growl thundered from Torak's chest as he lunged onto the fallen angel. Lucifer's smirk disappeared as he moved with lightning speed to avoid the Alpha's attack. He barely managed to avoid the first attack when Torak had moved next to him and clawed his head. Lucifer's golden eyes dilated as his figure fused with his own shadow, left Torak with nothing. Torak's claw only cut the empty space, and his red eyes scoured his surrounding, looking for another threat that would come from the Satan. Be careful with your temperament, my old friend, or else you will end up hurting your fragile mate. Lucifer's voice echoed from through the wall in Torak's office. As the voice was faded, the door of Torak's office slammed open with a loud noise. Alpha. The first person who came from the door was Raphael, his beta. His dark eyes were looking for the possible threat with Caleb follow behind him in his dark gray wolf form. They heard Torak's growl along with the sound of glass breaking. Something wasn't right must be happening inside the office room. Alpha, someone was here? Raphael asked, but he couldn't see anyone there. Neither he saw someone walked inside the room just now. Meanwhile, Caleb raised his snout higher as he tried to catch something in the air with no avail. Torak, who had half shifted, turned into his human form, ignoring Raphael's question as he dashed toward the door and yelled an order. Tell Seraphina I come to the apartment now. She better with Raine when I am there, and tell Jack Don't let Raine disappear from his sight. In spite of the lack of understanding of the situation, Raphael and Caleb knew it must have something to do with their Luna. There was no one could make his alpha so antsy like this, but who the person that he met? That could make him flipped out like this? They saw no one stepped in or out from the room. Will do right away. Raphael fished out his phone while Caleb ran with his 4 legs, chasing after Torak. The situation didn't look good for them. Equals 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 equals. Raine was reading a book that Arrow had given her this morning, trying to catch up with her last lesson when she was still in the orphanage, when suddenly she heard a quarrel between Jack and Seraphina. Before Raine could decipher about what they were arguing, her bedroom door had thrown open with so much force until it left a dented mark on the wall behind it. From behind the door, it showed the anxious Jack, locked his wary eyes on Raine. "Come here, Raine." Jack waved his hand at Raine, like a big brother called his little sister to go home from playing too long. Raine put down her book and obliged. She walked closer toward Jack when she heard Seraphina's cynical comment. "What are you fussing about?" Seraphina threw her body on the sofa lazily. Torak only exaggerated the situation. Jack didn't heed her comment as he led Raine out of her room protectively by holding her shoulder. He didn't let the Luna out of his arm reach. Actually, he also wasn't sure what exactly was happening, but from the way Raphael talked to him through the phone, it was something urgent and dangerous that involved the safety of Raine. All the creatures in this realm knew how long Torak had been existing without a mate, and once she appeared now, naturally he wouldn't let anything happen to her. Jack glanced at Raine, who was staring at him with her big doe eyes. "Something bad happened?" Raine asked, slightly nervous by how Jack reacted. She hugged her body while sitting next to Jack, and same like him, she was also ignoring Seraphina's sardonic remark. "Raphael told me that the Alpha is on his way to come and see you." Jack told her. In an instant, Raine's worry expression turned brighter. The change of her mood was very noticeable. "He will come." Her voice was filled with anticipation that made Seraphina sneered and turned to leave the living room and spend her time to stay inside her bedroom, leaving Jack and Raine alone. "Yes, he should be here in no time," Jack assured Raine. And just like a child who got her early present, Raine smiled to herself while looking at the door expectantly. It had been a long time, many years, since the last time Raine was expecting someone's presence. When Jack finished saying that, there was a knocking sound that could be heard from the door. "That must be the Alpha." Jack stood up to open it. Torak has a bad feeling about Lucifer's visit. Moreover, he knew about Raine's identity. Before, Belphegor only knew Raine as the guardian angel, but wasn't sure about her importance as Torak's mate. The sloth thought Torak protected her merely because she would be the crucial part of the impending bloodshed between the creatures, just like centuries ago. Torak didn't care even a bit about what would happen with this world. The only thing he cared, the thing that he concerned the most, was his mate, nothing else. The hell could freeze over or the world could crumble into dust, but as long as Raine was safe and sound, another thing wasn't a matter for him. Torak went to the BSM NT of the 29-story building and climbed into his sport car, with Caleb, who had turned back into his human form, sat beside him. Afterward, he drove the black Bugatti like a madman. There was no traffic jam in this hour, but that didn't make Torak could arrive at the apartment faster, because there were 20 chupacabra chased after them. The dog sucking blood. Caleb buckled up as he held tight to stabilize himself. He was a Lycan who had a fast healing ability, but it didn't mean he was immune with pain. Once the car crashed and he was thrown out, the pain would be so unbearable for the first few seconds before their healing ability took over. If it was possible, Caleb didn't want to experience that. However, it was impossible also to give some advice to the outraged Lycan beside him. "There are chupacabra that followed us." Caleb saw the creatures was hot on their paws. One of the sucking blood creatures managed to jump atop of the fast-driven car and clawed the roof, followed by the other chupacabra, which jumped one by one, covered the Torak side from the road. With a low, vicious growl, Torak swerved the car and smashed concrete road divider on his left, brought the car to traverse the other side of the traffic road. In a jiffy, the screeching sound from many cars hit the brake filled the quiet night. Two of the chupacabra that covered the front door glass were thrown out of the front glass, because Torak got a sight of the canal at the other side of the road. Torak hit the accelerator until it flat with the ground as he directed the car toward the canal. Next to the Alpha, the Gamma's eyes opened wide as he realized what Torak was about to do. Shift! Torak barked as the car sped forward and flew straight to the canal. Torak and Caleb opened the car door at the same time before the car sunk into the water and immediately shifted into their Lycan form. As their big paws clawed the ground, their chaser had made the first attempt to attack them directly. With a thunderous roar, the white Lycan raised his claw and slit 2 chupacabra bodies into 2 as the black blood tainted his pure fur. The other gray Lycan did the same as he bit down the chupacabra's neck until it couldn't move again and pressed one under his feet, clawed at chest before he lunged onto the other. The beast fight occurred for some time before the 2 Lycan were the only ones standing in the middle of the carcasses of the chupacabra. After that short and intense battle, the gray wolf whined as he licked his injured front leg. Apparently, it was a result of the bite of the chupacabra. The white Lycan glanced over to check on his Gamma before he dashed toward the other direction. "Stay there. Raphael and the other warriors will come." "Torak mind," linked Caleb. The chupacabra's bite was poisonous, but the healing ability of the lycanthropes would manage to mitigate the fatal outcome. Moreover, there was something more important that Torak had to do. His mate was in danger. Those creatures were sent to him wasn't for the purpose to kill him. Of course, that was a stupid idea for his enemy to think merely chupacabra could take down Torak. Those creatures were sent to slow him down from whatever he was about to do, and the only thing in his mind was Raine. His mate, his only solace, his soul. He shouldn't entrust his mate to Seraphina or his warrior or whatever they were. He should keep his mate close to him. Such a nonsense that the witch had blurted out that he should keep a distance from her. What the difference now? Raine was still in danger, and Seraphina better kept her word to keep her safe. If something should happen to Raine, the fault was his. In the other hand, the gray Lycan stubbornly followed his Alpha, though he was left behind. Caleb grimaced with every step that he took, but he tried to not slow down his paces. "Raph, are you near?" Caleb tried to mind Link the Beta, but seemingly they were too far from each other. "Ugh, I want to tear the face of the person who had sent those dogs, sucking blood over." He grumbled. Equals 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 equals. It took longer time than Torak had predicted to reach the apartment. As soon as he saw the building, he followed his instinct to catch Raine's scent in the air. It was a faint, rainy smell that had grown inside him. His mate was near. Torak climbed the building and entered through the open window in the 11th floor, where Raine's flat was. While he strode toward Raine's flat door, his bones snapped as his body turned into his human form. Once he was knocking the door, Torak was the uncanny, clean-cut CEO. He didn't care if someone was taking a photo of him being there. Human would think it was impossible for Tor Donovan was being there. However, that was the last thing that he concerned. When the door was opened, Jack greeted him, but Torak stepped in directly. His eyes scoured the room, looking for her. "Where is Raine?" he asked demandingly. The word of impatient wouldn't suffice to describe him. "Luna is there, in the living room." Jack turned around and pointed where Raine was sitting a few seconds ago before he walked away to open the door. But no one there. She had gone. Asterisk. Jack could feel blood rush to his head the moment he saw Raine had gone. She was there a second ago. He just left her out of his sight because he had to open the door, but within that second someone had taken her, and now he had to deal with his Alpha. Jack stammered, but before he could complete his sentence, Torak had grabbed his neck and slammed him to the wall behind him. The wall cracked as the debris scattered around both of him. Jack was having a hard time to breathe. He wasn't that fast to avoid the sudden attack of Torak, neither he had the comparable strength as his. "Where is she?" Torak roared right in front of his face. His eyes turned blazing red and his canines elongated. Torak's sharp claws embedded on Jack's neck caused blood was dripping from his open wound. He was ready to kill his warrior at this point. Drew another blood in this chaotic night. "Alpha." Jack felt lightheaded as his eyes rolled back in his skull, and his hands clumsily tried to pry open the grip on his neck with no avail. Torak had lost it. He lost all the reason to spare another creature life. He just wanted his mate, and she was gone. Someone took her, and the Lycan before his eyes failed his task. He deserved to die. When Torak was about to squeeze the life out of him, he felt an annoying tug on the back of his neck. It didn't bother him at first, but the feeling grew intense, as if someone was trying to choke him. Torak, let him go. A sweet female voice was sounded from behind his back, but it wasn't the voice that he wanted to hear. Her sin also felt so wrong with him, it didn't settle the raging beast that banging his head. Torak let out an ear-piercing roar as he threw Jack across the room with so much force. Jack's body flew a few meters away, smashed the bar stool, and only stopped when his body collided with the concrete wall that's shaking by the brute force. Seraphina was standing there, wrapped her voluptuous body with black fitted turtleneck shirt and skinny jeans. She looked sexy and mature, but the only thing in Torak's mind when he saw her was to cut her limb to limb. Where is she? It was a low growl from under his breath, the evidence of his attempt to suppress the raging storm beneath him, his last attempt before the beast unleashed and created more destruction. Torak swore would kill Seraphina if her answer, she was hiding Raine and wanted him to stay away from his mate. It wasn't time for that. The witch should know how serious the situation to pull that excuse with Torak now. Someone broke my spell and took her. Seraphina admitted she felt ashamed. No matter how she beautified her words, it was her mistake to take lightly Raphael's warning when he called her before. Without warning, Torak had stood in front of Seraphina and clawed his body brutally. The witch let out a shrill scream as she moved aside to avoid the Lycan another attack. Seraphina's instinct to survive kicked in as she waved her hand wildly, sending a cabinet toward Torak's direction that he easily shoved it away as if it was weight nothing for him. The cabinet crushed the wall and broke into pieces. Torak, stop it. You don't help her if you kill me. Seraphina tried to reason with Torak. It was a hard job to do as the Lycan listened to no one. Torak stormed over, his red eyes filled with murderous intention when he reached Seraphina's hand and was about to tear her apart when suddenly a fireball was thrown to his face, burnt his white fur. That action didn't stop Torak. If anything, that only made him more furious. He snarled at Seraphina, losing himself for his beast, trying to rip every inch of the witch's body, but there was an invincible wall that held him, kept him only a step away from the bleeding witch. Stop your useless reaction. Seraphina yelled at Torak from inside her protection. She cradled her limp right arm, that bleeding incessantly as a result of Torak's attack earlier. However, how he could hear her when the only thing that ringing in his ears was to kill any creatures that he could see. She had admitted that she failed to keep Raine safe after his warning and after all he had done to show how important Raine for him. How Seraphina was so narrow-minded to belittle the importance of this situation. She deserved to die. Seraphina could feel the protection that she built around her gradually crumbled because of Torak's continuous attempt to shatter it. She wouldn't be able to survive once Torak grabbed a hold of her. Thus she closed her eyes while chanting a charm from strange language, and the moment her eyes were opened, they were the color of fire. Enough! The witch suddenly stood up with fire in her hands. Her body emanated flame, the same fire that burning in her eyes. The sudden outburst didn't affect much on Torak, as his Lycan only took a few steps back before he lunged onto her for another attack. However, before Torak could come closer, a wall of fire was conjured between them. Because of a lot of smoke and fire, the alarm was blaring and water gushing out from fire sprinkler on the ceiling, followed by the automated evacuation message, which warned people inside the building to not use the elevators. Torak, your rage will not help her. In spite of the water that flooded the floor, the fire that encircled Seraphina didn't extinguish even a bit. The white Lycan was sodden, but his blazing eyes were glaring with unfathomable indignation as his breathing raged. Alpha! A voice sounded in Torak's head, trying to reach onto him despite the Alpha attempt to shut any interference from outside. Another Lycan trudged inside the room. His wounded leg had been healed, but apparently the poison from Chupacabra's bite still affected him. At the open door from behind the Lycan, there were commotion because of the alarm was set off as many people were running toward the emergency stairs. The white Lycan posed a defense stance as he felt there was another creature near him and bare his fangs toward the gray Lycan. Caleb's Lycan whimpered as he lowered his head, showing his nape as a sign that he wasn't mean any harm. Slowly, Caleb turned into his human form, display his vulnerability form, in order to save his life from Torak's wrath. Alpha, there's news that you have to know. Caleb spoke under the assessing eyes of Torak. He glanced at Jack, the warrior, who wasn't moving from the ground. He looked dreadful with blood, stained his shirt and the floor beneath him, but his undulated chest was a sign that he was still alive. Torak's Lycan wasn't in the situation to hear any news if it wasn't about Raine. Ramon de' Medici killed his brother, Remy. The news is not out yet, said Caleb, that was granted with an angry roar from Torak as his already bigger Lycan looked more bigger than usual. Caleb startled as he took 2 steps back. He didn't know what was wrong with the information that he said. Torak's anger was not relevant. Do you really think he wants to hear about some Medici kill each other? Serafina asked Caleb in mocking tone while keeping his protection and the wall of fire surround her. Raine is gone. You better help me to calm him down. Gone? Caleb asked incredulously. His jaw dropped open as he glanced at the Lycan, who glared at the wall of fire in front of him wrathfully. How is that possible? Don't you have everything under control? He couldn't help but getting angry as well. Yes, I have. Serafina grimaced when she moved her injured arms, trying to maintain the protection around her exasperatedly. She was a powerful witch, but somehow her power has less effect on the Donovans. Something about them, the part that she couldn't explain, holding much power than any creatures. Stop talking and help me to settle him. Serafina glared at Caleb. He will kill me. No offense. Caleb raised his hand in the air. But he will kill me if I try to walk any closer than this. What is more, you deserve that. I recall Raphael had told you to keep an eye on our Luna. If it wasn't because Torak was venting his wrath towards Serafina and Caleb was given the opportunity, he wouldn't mind to finish the witch with his own 2 hands. She was really irresponsible with her task, though she was the one who very determined to separate Torak and Raine. In spite of her reason, that was for Raine's sake, but it felt so awful to not be able with their own mate, especially when they just saw each other. With a loud of cracking sound, the protection around Serafina was broke by Torak brute force. With wide eyes, the witch saw the big Lycan raise his claws and brought them straight to her face. Serafina couldn't teleport as her power was depleting from the firewall and the protection that she had built. Moreover, Torak's move was too fast for her until she couldn't even blink when he had stood right before her eyes. A shrill agony scream sounded from Serafina's mouth as she felt her flesh was torn open and blood gushing out from her wound on her face. Before Torak could really claw her into limb to limb, a big brown wolf with black strip on his left side ran into Torak's Lycan, and as their body collided, a sound of broken bone could be heard. Bring them out of here. Raphael's voice rung inside Caleb's head, full with commanding tone. In front of Caleb, the beta took head on their alpha as both of them growl and clawed at each other. Raph, back off. You will kill yourself if you continue. Caleb mind linked Raphael in panic as he saw Torak manage to send him flew a few meters away before the big brown wolf broke a cabinet with his weight. Ow! Raphael got on his feet and lunged onto Torak before he could kill Serafina right there, and then the mind link cut off, leaving Caleb with task in his hand. Fortunately, at that time Jack had regained his conscience, only a little bit disoriented as he took his surroundings. Fire on the other side and water pouring down from the ceiling as commotion occurred out of the room, while inside, the 2 powerful Lycan clashed at each other. The big brown wolf whimpered and tried hard to not bow down in front of the alpha as he kept launching blow after blow. Caleb ducked down, avoiding the two Lycans who still engaged in intense battle as he reached Seraphina and helped her to stand up. The Gamma suppressed his desire to throw her out of the window. Since the first time she came, she was so annoying, and now this happened. Caleb thought Raphael's effort to save her was a waste. Why didn't he let their alpha to tear her apart? Maybe by then they could placate Torak's anger a bit. "Jack, get out from here!" Caleb shouted at the warrior who was still in daze, while carried the bleeding Seraphina out of the room. Caleb didn't need to look, as he knew Raphael was blocking Torak's way, so they could get out from the room and blend with the other occupant of the apartment. Jack trudged behind Caleb while rubbing his neck, where Torak almost choked him to his death. They went down by emergency stairs with the other people. At the parking lot, firefighter had arrived, and people had gathered together while looking at the smoke and fire from one of the flat in the 11th floor, which Seraphina had created. "Good job, witch. You managed to gather more attention than it needed," Caleb remarked with derision as they walked toward the car that had been driven by Raphael to come here. Not only that, there was another 2 cars with another 4 warriors waiting. Apparently, Raphael had ordered them to not follow him. Seraphina, who was carried in Caleb's arms, was too weak to retort his sarcastic word. Caleb put her on the back of Raphael's car. "2 of you stay here, and the other follow me," he ordered shortly, knowing his own condition. Should another sneak attack like with the Chupacabra earlier happen again, Caleb wouldn't be able to defend the 2 injured Lycan and witch with him. Thus he took the 2 warriors with him and left the 2 to look out for Torak and Raphael. "Report to me immediately if something happened," Caleb said sternly before he climbed onto the driver's seat and started the engine after Jack sat in the shotgun seat. Giving the last glance at the chaotic situation behind him from the rearview mirror, Caleb drove the car away from the apartment. "Let's hope Raphael will be able to pacify the alpha, or else I will not stupid enough to throw myself between you and him like what Raphael did." Caleb said that viciously without slightly warm in his tone, and he meant every word that he said. Along the way, Raphael kept in tab with the other warrior who was still in the apartment, but there was no significant progress. The alpha and the beta was still out of sight. "Damn it," Caleb punched the wheel. "The alpha will not kill Raphael, right?" he asked to no one out of exasperation. "Beta Raphael is a strong Lycan," Jack replied, but that didn't answer Caleb's question. Of course, Raphael is a strong Lycan, as Beta's blood was running down his veins, but Torak was the alpha, the supreme alpha on top of that. He could squash Raphael without a second thought if he really wanted to. On the back seat, Seraphina looked like she was sleeping if it wasn't for the orange light from her right hand that illuminated the wound on her left hand. She was trying to heal herself. "Which?" Caleb called Seraphina without slightly respect in his voice, and he didn't care about that. "Do you have any idea where is Raine? Or who took her?" Seraphina didn't give an answer immediately while she was still in middle of healing herself. The wound on her arms gradually closed before she moved her flashing hand with an odd light to her face. "No one took her," Seraphina said in weak voice. "I didn't feel any force from outside that penetrated my protection when Raine disappeared. I would have known if there was someone or creatures that wanted to break it." Her voice sounded confused. "I just left Raine out of my sight for 3 seconds, and she is gone when I return," Jack added. "So what does that mean?" Seraphina shook her head. She was also clueless about what exactly happened, but then her expression slightly changed when something crossed her mind. "But how if the force wasn't coming from outside of my protection, but from inside? I wouldn't know." Lucifer gulped down his scotch that burned his throat like hell. Oh, how he missed that place, with all the torture and the agony that filled the air. Blood and scream. He watched the flat screen in front of him with disinterest. A news anchor reported about the death of the old family from Fulbright City, de Medici. Remy de Medici was killed by his own younger brother, Ramon de Medici, in his own mansion. His motive was still unknown, but both siblings was known didn't get along pretty well as they would fight at the court over the family heritage. In addition, with their finance was nearly collapsing. If it wasn't for Donovan's company that had given them cash injection and took over the nearly bankrupt company, they wouldn't have survived for long, leaving the great family's history behind as they faced their downfall. Therefore, the most question that was on people's lips was, why? Torak Donovan had helped them to re-establish their family's company. Thus, for what reason Ramon killed his brother? Lucifer shook the glass in his hand gently as the liquid swirled. Apparently, there is another people dislike the Lycan set a foot in this city. Lucifer mumbled as he raised his golden eyes to look at the woman across the room. Any news from the guardian angel? It was Lilith, ambling in an easy pace toward Lucifer and sat down beside him. Such a heartless devil. Lilith pursed her lips coquettishly. The first thing you ask is that little girl. Lucifer frowned when Lilith rested her hand on his left shoulder. The wound from the short battle with Torak before was still hurt. In the end, the devil still had not regained his full strength. What a shame. Any clue who took her? Lucifer gulped down the liquid in his glass that Lilith had poured to dull the pain in his shoulder. He chuckled on this. His body became more mortal years by years, ever since the last battle centuries ago. It required him a great effort to rebuild everything, anticipating the resurrection of the dark days, when the realms in this universe colliding once again. Lilith gave a nonchalant shrug. I don't know. Even the Alpha went rampant when he knew the guardian angel was missing. She propped her chin between her palm, cupping her small face. His reaction was truly brutal. Such an excessive anger. He really became the dog of the moon goddess. Those Donovans aren't like that before. Lilith thought Torak's anger was because he blamed himself for the missing angel. Every creature in these realms knew there would be a time when 3 guardian angels were resurrected from extinction, but it was also one of the signs of the resurrection of the dark days. He didn't take an order from Selene. Lucifer informed her. No, impossible. Lilith flicked her hair from her shoulder. He has been keeping the angel beside him, like a madman, and even called the Seraphina, which to look after her. He keeps the angel not because of Selene. He keeps her because she is his mate. Lucifer said it lightly. Lilith didn't give any response at first, but then her crispy laugh rung out inside the empty bar as she was laughing heartily. Everyone knows the Donovan won't have mates for their lifetime. It is their curse from Selene herself. She kept laughing, but then ceased down in a chuckle when she saw Lucifer didn't have a change of expression. You mean Selene will give them mates if they are able to keep the guardian angels safe, right? At this point, Lilith didn't laugh anymore. When there was no response from Lucifer, she frowned. Were you saying the truth? The angels are the Donovan's mates. Lilith widened her eyes in disbelief. She still didn't know about this, neither Belphegor. Well, the latter was too lazy to find out about this matter anyway. The sin of lie is not bestowed upon me. Lucifer eyed Lilith as he pushed his empty glass, waiting for her to pour another bottle for him. You don't need to be bestowed with the sin of lie to be a devil, even human lie. Lilith smirked while pouring down the red liquid from its expensive bottle, the red color that reminded them of the blood. Equals 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 equals. It was almost dawn when finally Torak and Raphael returned to the mansion, which Torak had bought the moment he decided to establish their business in this city, so he could be near Raine. However, he lost her in the end. The bruises that were still not healed yet and the blood, which stained Raphael's front shirt, was vivid evidences how brutal their battle before. It was a good thing that Raphael could still manage to stand on his own 2 feet when he walked inside the room with Torak, who looked slightly more sober. Torak didn't even spare Seraphina a glance when he went inside the living room straight to his own bedroom. The 2 of you all right? Caleb asked in low voice, afraid if his question would aggravate the Alpha again. They didn't need another battle now. Raphael shook his head as he rubbed his neck. It was a close call when Torak bit down his neck and almost killed him. Sure enough, he wouldn't try to get the bad side of Torak again. Not for this witch. Raphael walked in front of Seraphina. She looked much better than the last time he saw her. What you have? He asked with stern voice. I have bad news and worse news. Seraphina crossed her arms and legs defensively. Bad and worse. Raphael, shot dagger, looked at her. I should let Torak kill you earlier. What she meant by bad and worse news. He didn't save her life to hear that. He thought it would be a waste if Torak killed her just like that. Probably she knew something that they didn't know, but apparently his judgment was wrong. Don't tell me that I didn't tell you the same thing before. Caleb chimed in, slumped his tall body on the sofa opposite Seraphina. Ignoring Caleb's sarcastic comment, Raphael gave his attention on the witch. What is the bad news? Bad news. Seraphina gave a disdain look to Caleb for his remark before she continued. The person who has taken Raine is not Lucifer, Belphegor, Lilith, or whatever creatures out there who want her. Raphael frowned. Before Seraphina could explain further, Caleb had talked. She thinks someone who took her was from inside her protection. Seraphina scowled because Caleb took her line. However, there were not another people at that time except Jack and her. Caleb nodded towards Seraphina. So, she thinks Raine was the one who had made herself disappeared. Nonsense. Raphael growled incredulously upon hearing that theory. That was also my reaction. Caleb nodded his head as he reckoned his own reaction when he heard Seraphina's explanation. The witch closed her eyes, irritated. Thank you for your explanation, but there is the part that you left behind. Seraphina glared at Caleb when she opened her eyes. Oh, right. Caleb flicked his finger. She said Luna, unintentionally, inadvertently, and accidentally activated her power. He exaggerated some part of his sentences as he felt it was ridiculous. However, Seraphina didn't think the same thing as she meant her every word when the idea crossed her mind. The worst news, I don't know what power that she possesses and where her power took her, or what will happen to her if she can't control it. Seraphina said before Caleb could talk, that I assume she can't. Torak will not be pleased to hear this. Raphael raised his head and looked at the second story of the mansion, where Torak's bedroom was located. Seraphina, if you don't have good news or better news, you better stay away from him before he changes his mind and tear you apart. Seraphina scowled upon hearing Raphael's warning, but she knew the beta said the right thing. Her mistake was fatal this time. Raine could be in danger because of her own power, or she could be somewhere that they didn't know. Everything could happen to her, and she would still not be able to protect herself. One annoying job that the moon goddess had bestowed to her. Seraphina snorted. The space around her was like caving in and pressed her body down to the abyss of the dark. She felt like her being crammed into a wormhole until a blazing light invaded her vision. It was a white, blinding light, like someone had put a spotlight on her head, made her a center of attention. A little girl, who was hugging herself while covering her face, was trying to peek through her fingers, assessing her surroundings with fear and panic thumping in her heart. She could literally feel her heartbeat on her throat. This was an odd light. She could tell by the way its blazing started to fade the moment she opened her eyes, as if allowing her to take the situation she was in now. The more the girl blinked her eyes, the more vivid the scene that presented in front of her eyes. She was in a deserted place. A barren land more or less. A landscape of sand with harsh sun above her head, tumbleweed and dead grasses. The wind howling and the smell of dry baked earth invaded her small nose. Raine scrunched her face when she took her surrounding into her understanding. A blink of an eye before she was still in the living room with Jack, who had opened the door, and Seraphina, who went back inside her room. However, later on, she was in this deserted place. Jack! Raine whispered into the wind as she called out the warrior's name, hoping he was also in this strange place, that she wasn't alone there. However, her hope was only a wishful wish as her voice was brought away by the wind. Torak. Raine's voice slightly stronger as she called out his name. Fear and trepidation laced at her voice. Raine stood up, and pirouette, with confusion, was written on her face. She could see nothing. It was only sand until the line of the horizon, where the bright, clear orange sky met with sandstone. She didn't know whether she should stay or she had to go. But where? There was no sign of inhabitant from all the direction that Raine could see. The scorching sunlight, burnt her skin, and in no time her sweater had stuck closely to her body uncomfortably. Raine didn't want to take off her sweater and only wearing her white sleeveless shirt, but the humidity was choked her until she had hard time to breath. It was too hot. Torak, Raine screamed, now out of the anxiety that she felt. She was afraid, and moreover she didn't know why she was here. The desert was too vacant and mysterious for her to venture aimlessly. As the atmosphere was getting thick and her sweater had damp from her sweat, Raine felt lightheaded while her breathing became irregular. When a numbness crept in her legs, she felt the dry taste of the sand entered her mouth as her body was going limp, lack of strength to support her body. A while later, she had been lying flat on the sea of sand, and her mind started shutting down with her closing eyes. Raine's lips quivered before she gave in to the dark once again. The howling wind grew bigger, and her shadow danced like a fata morgana, before it got bigger and engulfed the girl. Equals 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 equals. The alpha is gone. Jack slammed open the door with so much force until the poor thing screeched. The warrior also looked so much better than the last time he was almost being killed by Torak. Earlier, he went to Torak's room because Raphael wasn't able to mind. Link him, they needed to discuss about what step that they should take and about Seraphina's theory about Raine's power. Jack volunteered to check on him. Despite what he had done to him before, it was his fault to let down his order after all and made their Luna disappeared, though he actually wasn't really at fault. But more or less, he knew what the importance of mate in Lycan's life. Now what? Seraphina grumbled in irritation. Where he has gone. Before it was Raine, and now Torak also had disappeared. Someone said he saw Alpha shifted and went to the direction of the 2nd District of Fulbright City. Jack informed them. Raphael was squinted his eyes. 2nd District? Wait. Caleb raised his hand and frowned. 2nd District is the place where Andromalius lives, isn't it? Torak must have thought that Andromalius has something to do with the disappearance of Raine. Both Raphael and Caleb exchanged knowing looked and growled at the same time before they jumped from their seat and ran toward the door. That wasn't a good sign. Jack, take Seraphina with you and follow me. Raphael ordered the warrior before he disappeared behind the door, followed closely by Caleb. Take me with you, Seraphina hissed, but stood up elegantly before Jack could approach her. Show me the way, she said callously. She was still her arrogant self. Jack swallowed his critics because there was another important thing in hand that needed his concern and walked in front of the haughty witch. Equals 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 equals. Torak appeared all of a sudden inside the lobby of City Council's office, were almost empty. The dim moonlight illuminated his tall body and his chiseled face that looked very stern, as his eyes were the color of blood. The two securities, who were guarding the door, were startled by Torak's sudden appearance. They knew him as the famous CEO from Donovan Company, who would invest huge amount of money in manufacturing in this Fulbright city. After all, he had just come yesterday morning with people from central government and made a headline in news business. Furthermore, his name was on people's lips when the news about the Medici family exploded. The Medici family was Torak's stepstone to enter the business in Fulbright City. If something happened to them, it would affect his business as well and all the projects that he had signed with the government. Mr. Donovan, one of the securities, greeted him in shock. He blinked his eyes several times in addition of Torak's red eyes. He thought he was seeing things because of his late-night shift. What brings you here in this early morning? He glanced at his watch that showed it was still 3:21 a.m. Torak ignored him as he strode toward the other securities. He was a man in his early 40s and had wrinkled on the corner of his eyes when he squinted his eyes, trying to look at Torak clearly from behind his thick glasses. Where is she? Torak asked the other security with hostility. His tone alone could send chill ran down people who heard him. Mr. Donovan, I don't understand what you mean. The other security frowned that made the wrinkled on his eyes deepened. Torak didn't have time to talk nonsense with him. All the more had to deal with his poor acting. Do you know him? The first security elbowed his fellow friend, who shook his head helplessly. Who doesn't know him? He whispered back at his friend. He is the famous CEO from yesterday morning, right? That's not what I meant. He talked to you. Why an important person like him wanted to talk with you? A mere guard? The first security was eyeing Torak with bewilderment, especially at his eyes. Did he wear contact lens? Torak was running out his patient as he stormed toward the older security and raised his hand into a fist and landed it downright on his chest that sent him flung a few meters away. The old security flew in the air before his body collided with the solid wall. His body collapsed and remained on the ground in weird position. What the hell? The other security's eyes were like popped out from its socket when he watched the scene that unfolded. That was inhuman strength. It happened very fast, and no one could see that coming. The younger security's breath hitched as he couldn't give a proper reaction. For seconds he was standing there like a fool while looking at his fellow buddy, trying to discern the situation. As though he did nothing, Torak walked closer to the collapsed body and pressed his foot against his chest. He leaned over as he asked the same question. Where is she? What are you doing? You will kill him. The other guard finally snapped himself out from his shock and tried to push Torak away. He really would kill the poor man if he kept doing that, but why he did that? Something wasn't feel right. However, his attempt was stopped by a single glare from Torak. His eyes were bloodshot, as if could burn him right there and then. It was something that he couldn't explain with word. The other man stumbled and plopped down on his back as his eyes locked on Torak's next action. Torak grabbed the man's neck, who was lying beneath his feet, and squeezed his throat. Blood splattered on Torak's front shirt and the other security's face, the moment the man's neck broken and became headless. RFK! The other guard screamed on the top of his lungs as he crawled and ran away from the bloody scene. Torak didn't give a glance at the other man. Fortunately, this was a secluded spot whereas no many securities were stationed there. Even so, within less than 3 minutes, that place would fill with many people the moment they heard about the guard's ear-piercing scream. But that wasn't Torak's concern now. He looked at his bloody hand coldly, waiting for something to happen. And it did happen. The blood and the flesh beneath his feet moved on its own, as if they had their own mind, gliding and fusing together as they recreated and reformed its former self, a human. You are sure so rude, Alpha. The man who was dead a minute before with neck was crushed, now was standing unscathed in front of Torak while rubbing his neck with derision on his expression. Where is she? Torak asked the same question for the third time. He was tempted to squash his head again, but it wouldn't help his case. You know that I didn't take her, right? The man hissed in irritation. So, she is indeed very precious for you. He contemplated while stroking his chin. I know, but I assume you know where she is. Torak didn't avert his eyes when the man's eyes in front of him started to change their color and shape became yellow slit. This is your special eyes after all, Andromalius, finding a precious hidden thing. Well, now you admit that she is important to you. The question remains the same like the last time I asked you. Who is she to you? Andromalius gave a mocking smile, found this thing was more interesting than his night shift. Find her, and you will know. Torak's cold and calm voice reminded about the frozen river in the middle of the winter. Looked calm, but no one knew the raging stream beneath it. Is this a plea? Andromalius raised one of his brows. You have a weird way to ask someone favor. He clicked his tongue and vanished from Torak's vision. This is a threat. Torak set into the empty space, where Andromalius had stood a while before. Find her, and I will not make things difficult for you during my stay in your territory. Andromalius suddenly appeared again, but this time he was standing behind Torak. His old appearance changed, and instead he was the man that Torak had met at the airport, the first day he landed in this city. That is not how you make a deal, Alpha. He shook his head while making a face. You shouldn't threaten the person who you asked for help. Torak didn't have time to play with word game of Andromalius. He turned his back and walked away as he could hear footsteps of more than 3 people who were approaching toward his direction. The truth was his silent threat spoke volume than when he said it out loud. Andromalius didn't know what the Alpha would do, but he was pretty sure it wasn't a good thing. He could just let the fight happen, but he knew the result wouldn't be in his favor. Actually, this was ridiculous for him, for being threatened in his own territory. Why don't you ask your witch? It is Seraphina, right? The witch who is guarding the little girl. Andromalius was still trying to put up a front while asking Torak arrogantly. She is the great witch from the past, who has been missing from our realm for years, right? With the mention of Seraphina's name, Torak's calm F.A. Ade slightly hardened. I will hear news from your side before the sun rises. Torak said his final word before he shifted into his white wolf and disappeared from Andromalius's sight before the owner of the loud footsteps arrived at the scene. Andromalius clicked his tongue when he saw many guards came. How you can give a ridiculous request like that? Now, it was 4:02 a.m. He had just approximately an hour at best before the sun rose. Not to mention, he should find another pretension now, since Torak had killed the security guard. He saw his former fellow, paled, and kept shaking his head, as if in that way he could reposition his brain and understood the situation better. His eyes widened while pointing his finger at the spot where Andromalius had died before. I saw Torak Donovan killed him. He yelled to the other 7 guards who had followed him to this place. I swear to God, he killed him, but there was no one here. One of the guards cut the man, frantic explanation. Not even a single drop of blood. He said helplessly, "You must have seen a thing." The other person tried to justify his fellow reaction. "Why don't you lay down for a while? Maybe you're just tired." Being ignored, the man clenched his fist and barked. "Then tell me, where is he?" Andromalius shook his head, bemused by watching the commotion as no one from the guards could see him. "Human, they're so funny, aren't they?" A voice was startled Andromalius. He snapped his head toward the direction of the voice and could see nothing except the well-trimmed trees. "Well, I couldn't disagree with you," Andromalius drawled, but his eyes were still alert, looking at his surroundings. "I would like to have a conversation while looking my opponent's eyes, if you don't mind. You want to see my eyes?" "You want to see my eyes?" A whisper that's so close to Andromalius's ears, as if that person was on his nape, could be heard. Startling, Andromalius snapped his head to his left and saw those beautiful golden eyes. They were shining brightly under the dim light. "Lucifer," Andromalius greeted his old friend. "I should know, it is you." His smile appeared, but it didn't reach his eyes as he became alert. There was nothing good to have a business with this fallen angel. Lucifer let out an eerie chuckle. His golden eyes moved from Andromelius's face toward the commotion that he had created by being dead. A security guard? Huh? He raised one of his brows. What a lame fade. Andromelius shrugged his shoulder upon hearing the derision in his voice. I'm trying to be civil. There is nothing civil about our race, Lucifer remarked. He was wearing a black button-down shirt that looked unkempt with dark denim jeans. His curly hair was giving other people impression he just woke up from deep slumber. Lucifer, Andromelius shook his head. I am not in the same race as yours. Lucifer smirked. A fallen will always be a fallen. He made his own conclusion before he talked straight down to the business. I saw the Lycan was looking for you. The commotion was growing bigger with the guard, who were together with Andromelius in the night shift, lost his control, and yelled like a madman until someone took the initiative to look for the missing guard. Follow me, Lucifer said, quite irritated with the noisy situation. What a fuss that those human made. Andromelius couldn't turn down Lucifer's order. He didn't make a good impression with Torak. If he were to offend this devil also, he wouldn't have a good time from this moment onward. After all, he was also interested with the identity of the girl named Raine. Before Torak was trespassed his territory months ago, he had never heard something extraordinary about that girl, nothing special about her that caught his attention. However now, the two powerful creatures in this realm were fussing about that little girl. He had tried to find out about her, but Torak's people had moved faster than his to block the information about her. And now, Lucifer was coming for that girl as well. This rare occasion was truly interesting. Under the lamp street, Lucifer snapped his fingers, and both of them disappeared from the spot where they were standing a moment ago, vanished as though they had never been there in the first place. Lucifer and Andromelius appeared at the same bar where he was drinking with Lilith before. However, this time, Lilith was nowhere to be seen. Drink. Lucifer had stood behind the bar table and raised a bottle of whiskey. Yes, please, Andromelius said, sitting on the bar stool. He didn't recognize this place, neither he had a memory about it. This place must be out of his territory. Talk now. Lucifer pushed a rock glass under his nose as he sat down opposite him. What should I talk? Andromelius brought the glass near his nose and took a sniff on its scent before he took a big gulp. I need time to trace her. It was ridiculous for Torak to assume that I will be able to give him any news within 3 hours. Not to mention, I don't have any idea who she is. You don't know who is her? Lucifer asked incredulously. Andromelius was well known for his knowledge and his ability to find any important information. Thus, for him to not be able to know Raine's identity was quite a surprise for him. Torak had closed all the possible line and spot for me to find any information about the girl. He even went to the extent to erase those people's memory of the girl face. Andromelius explained, almost like he was complaining. Lucifer stroked his chin. If that is the case, then I have wasted my time and my whiskey. You're not that good, apparently, he said heartlessly. Andromelius slightly offended by Lucifer's provocation. It was you who came to me and brought me here. You are right. Lucifer agreed. That's why. You should make yourself useful. Give me the information about that girl whereabouts before you report to Torak, he said with finality. For your information, Andromelius gulped down the entire whiskey and pushed the empty glass toward Lucifer. The glass skidded on the surface of the marble table and was stopped by the other person. I don't take any order, especially in my own territory. He has to make this thing clear. If not, he would be treated like a dog who would accept any request from both the Lycan and the devil. This was Lucifer's sin, but he had a pride also that he needed to keep. Territory, Lucifer scoffed. There are only two territories, the upper world that ruled by Lycan and the underworld that ruled by me. So choose your place wisely. And this was another threat that Andromelius received within less than an hour. You are chased out by the heaven, my dear old friend. You don't have territory in this universe. Lucifer grabbed the glass, which Andromelius had pushed toward him, and it vanished into dust. Equals 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 equals. Raphael, Caleb, Seraphina, and Jack arrived at the council's office and were blocked out of the building by a police car while the police got down and greeted him. What happened inside? Raphael asked before the police could utter a word for him. Seeing it was Raphael, the personal assistant of Torak Donovan, the police startled. What a coincidence. Mr. Lockwood, am I right? The police assured the person, behind the wheel, identity first. Good morning, officer. Raphael became impatient with this exchange greeting. He knew something was wrong had happened inside. May I know what that's about? What a coincidence, sir. The police kept his politeness that Raphael didn't need at this moment. Someone had said that Mr. Donovan had killed someone and hid the body of the victim somewhere. There was a slightly changed of expression from Serafina and Jack, while Raphael and Caleb remained calm. Apparently, they were too late to stop their alpha to do something carelessly. It is really a coincidence for Mr. Lockwood to be here. The police officer explained the situation. He looked into the dark car curiously. Is Mr. Donovan inside? No, Mr. Donovan is in the hospital. Raphael said smoothly. He had a car accident a few hours ago. Shock crossed the police officer's face. How that could happen? How is Mr. Donovan now? His tone slightly rose by his surprise. We still look for the cause of the accident. Raphael nodded. Mr. Donovan is in the hospital, but his condition has stable now. The accident of Torak was indeed occurred when Chupacabra were chasing after Torak and Caleb. There were many witnesses who would testify for it. Added to the traffic camer, Torak's alibi was absolute. Because no human would be able to run around after that kind of dreadful accident, Raphael had taken care about this. About the hospital would be an easy task to be manipulated. No one would know about it. Oh, but the news. The police officer didn't recall hear something about Torak Donovan's accident. After all, Torak Donovan was under the spotlight recently, so it was almost impossible for media to miss something big like that. We were trying to suppress the news as long as possible. Raphael's words streamed down like a river. Mr. Donovan needs rest, and this kind of news will affect the business. The police officer scratched his head. I don't really understand about business. He said sheepishly. It is a good thing that Mr. Donovan is all right, but why Mr. Lockwood comes here in this early morning? I just passed by from the hospital and saw this commotion. Because of the business between our company and the government, I want to know what happened with the police line around this government building. Raphael said smoothly. Caleb really wanted to clap his hand for the beta. He was so smart and easy with his words. What a wonderful tongue that he has. Oh, I see. The police officer nodded his head in understanding. But, Mr. Lockwood, if you don't mind, will you inform me when Mr. Donovan is able to be visited? Because we will not be able to keep this news for a long time. After all, there is someone missing from the government building. Will do. Raphael nodded cooperatively. I will take my leave then, officer. Raphael rolled back the dark window and left the scene before the police officer could give a response. He had wasted enough time to answer that human question while Torak could be anywhere, running rampant, and put anyone in danger. So, any ideas where your alpha will be? Serafina. Equals 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 equals. Buzzing sound of people talking and the chirping bird was the first thing that intruded Raine's senses the moment she regained her consciousness. Before she could open her eyes, she felt something warm, thick, quilt blanketed her. She furrowed her brows as memories rushed back on her head. The squabble between Jack and Serafina. Someone was coming. Everything turned dark. And the dessert. Raine's eyes abruptly flew open as tossed away the quilt that hugged her body. She sat down and gauged her surroundings. Somehow, she was inside a weird room with many things that Raine couldn't tell were hanging atop of its ceiling. The only item that she could recognize was a dream catcher. There were 3 of them. Before she lost her conscience, she was in the middle of nowhere, a desert. However, now she could see snow fell from the clear sky as the temperature became so cold. Raine took back the quilt that she had tossed earlier and wrapped it around her body before she got off on the bed. The room's floor was covered with yellow rug that was very soft when her feet touched it. The room wasn't big. It was only consisted by 2 cabinets, a small table and chair, a hammock, which hung on the corner of the room, and the bed that Raine was sleeping on, which filled almost the entire room. Raine gritted her chattering teeth. How many degrees was this place? Why was it so cold? Raine had never been in a place as cold as this. You are awake. I thought you have died. A voice almost made Raine scream loudly. Fortunately, she had spent almost 5 years being mute, so she could handle this surprise quite well. Raine's eyes directed to the source of the voice, but she could see no one before the red tablecloth was lifted, and she found a little boy was sitting under a table. He hugged himself as if by doing that, no one would see him. You are sleeping for a week now. The little boy crawled from under the table. That's why my brother hangs those dream catchers, for good luck. He thought you were trapped in your dream. The little boy was quite a chatter, apparently. Raine didn't give any response in return, but she also didn't turn around and left, like her initial plan. Instead, she looked at the boy with curiosity. Probably he knew something. This your room. Raine tried to produce louder sound, but what came out from her mouth was barely a whisper. No, this is my brother's room, but he has been sleeping with me since you occupied his bed. The boy looked at Raine with accusation. Seemingly, he didn't like to share a bed with his older brother. The little boy looked like he was no older than 7 years old. He was wearing woolen clothes that Raine thought was too weird to be wearing in her era. His hair was the color of copper, with big blue ocean eyes that reminded Raine about Torak's eyes. How can I be here? Raine asked again. This time her voice had slightly better. The little boy shrugged as he walked closer toward Raine. My brother brought you here from the desert of no return. What were you doing there? My father said that place is really dangerous. Raine wanted to know also what she was doing there, or, for more precise, how she got there. What is the desert of no return? Raine asked while walking closer toward the boy. Huh? The little boy tilted his head as his little brows furrowed. You don't know the desert of no return? Raine shook her head honestly. She had never heard something like that or knew a place with that name even existed. Weird, the boy remarked. Everybody from this village knows about the desert of no return. That is forbidden place. His voice dropped until it was only a whisper. If that place is forbidden, so what your brother was doing there? Raine crouched down beside the table until both of them could see eyes to eyes with each other. My brother is a strong man. He is the strongest of guardian angel. The little boy talked about his brother with a voice that laced with pride. Actually, the expression that the little boy made was quite amusing, but there was something that aroused Raine's curiosity. Guardian angel? Raine repeated the strange word. Her eyebrows shot up. An angel? Is she died? Don't tell me you don't know about it too. The boy made another adorable expression as his mouth gaped open. He slapped his own head when Raine shook her head. Impossible. You don't even know about Guardian Angel? Where are you actually from? Fulbright City. Raine answered. I have never heard about that place. This time, he was the one who got confused. This situation was becoming more weird and weird with the conversation with the boy, or probably the one that Raine should talk to was his older brother. After all, he was only a child. Maybe your brother knows? Can I meet him? Raine suggested. The little boy shrugged and dusted imaginary dirt from his knees before he said like an older man. You can use that cloak. He pointed at the gray, thick cloak which hung on near the door. And follow me. Raine suppressed the smile that threatened to appear on her lips while following the boy. But her smile abruptly disappeared, and in exchange she let out a loud gasp when she saw her surroundings. The world that she had never seen before. The houses were made by fine wood while the lushes of the trees covered their roof, while some buildings were built by red brick that rose up into the sky. Lions and gargoyles made of stone adorned the fountain in the middle of this city, or village. Raine wasn't really sure what kind of this place that she was in. She felt like the Alice from a Wonderland as she stranded in this strange place. She felt uncomfortable and kept looking around, hoping she could see someone that she knew. The streets were bustling with people who were exchanging greeting or just smiling at each other as if they knew every single person. Some of people looked at Raine with curious gaze, but polite enough to not stare for a long time, while Raine lowered her head to avert their eyes. And like the little boy, many people were wearing woolen sweater under their lambskin coat to keep them warm from this cold wind. My brother is visiting our big sister's house, over there. The little boy pointed a small wooden house with many wilted flower on its fences. Come on. He waved his stubby hand to indicate Raine to follow him. Strangely enough, though she had passed out for a week, she didn't feel lethargic nor thirsty or hungry. It felt like she had just woken up from a good night's sleep. Here we are. The little boy beamed as he stepped in the terrace. Sister Lydia, Brother Lucas. Raine stood 2 steps behind the boy. Only now she realized that she even didn't know the boy's name. She should ask him before. When the door was opened from inside, a beautiful woman in her warm red velvet sweater appeared before their eyes. She smiled brightly while hugging the little boy, who snuggled closer onto her warm embrace. Oh, the woman gasped in surprise when she saw Raine. You have woken up. She released the small boy as she walked toward Raine and cupped her face with both her hands. Raine took a step backward out of habit. She still didn't use with the sudden touch, especially from the person that she didn't know. But the woman didn't mind with her gestured and stared at her face, checking Raine's complexion. Good. You're in good condition. She nodded in agreement. The medicine that I gave to you didn't have a bad side effect, apparently. Raine didn't say anything for that statement. She was at loss and just wanted to go home to be with Torak again. Come inside, it is cold outside. She took Raine's arm and led her inside the house. My name is Lydia. Lydia introduced herself before she pointed a man who was sitting on the couch that was covered by cozy white wool. He is Lucas. Lydia pointed at Lucas. He was also surprised to see Raine was there. He was the one who had found you in the desert of no return. Lucas turned his body, faced her, grinning. Your condition was so bad at that time. He informed her. Luckily, my sister could find something to help you. And Lucas went on with his story about how he had saved Raine, but the only thing that she wanted to know was how she could go back and where exactly she was now. If it wasn't because you called me, I wouldn't be able to find you there, Lucas remarked as he took a glass of drink from the tray that Lydia had brought over. Lydia put one glass on Raine's laps as she sat down between Raine and the little boy, who was busy moving his own hands in the air. I didn't call, was the first line that Raine said after she entered the house. You don't realize when you call for help. Lucas shrugged and gulped down his drink. Every guardian angel has our own way to communicate with each other. Raine's mouth gaped open. She didn't understand with this whole situation. What with this guardian angel thing? You don't know who you really are? Lydia caught Raine's confusion as she concluded. What do you mean with that? Raine asked. She tightened her grip on the edge of the sweater that she was wearing. You are one of us, Lydia exclaimed. A guardian angel. There was a thick silence that followed after Lydia's words as Raine was still trying to discern the information. I don't. Raine shook her head. She looked around as if she would find someone who she knew if she did so. Meeting Serafina would find too. I don't understand. She really doesn't know anything about this world. The little boy stopped playing with his hands and stared at Raine accusingly, as though her ignorance was a biggest sin. I live in Fulbright City, Raine said. Her voice was barely a whisper. May I know what this place? This is a village of Angel. The little boy was the one who answered her. When you feel my heat, look in my eyes. It's where my demons hide. It's where my demons hide. Don't get too close. It's dark inside. It's where my demons hide. It's where my demons hide. Demons. Imagine dragons. Raine didn't know how to process the information as she blinked her eyes and opened her mouth, but there was nothing she was able to say. There are not many like us. Lucas set his expression slightly down. Many creatures used to use our pureness for their sake. Raine overwhelmed. She couldn't catch up with this conversation. What the meaning with all of this? What he meant by many creatures? There were a lot of creatures that she had been seeing for these past 8 years here, which had driven her crazy. Her breath hitched when the idea crossed her mind. How was that possible? No, actually everything was possible. However, the real question was, where was she? How she could get back to Torak? She wanted to meet him badly. She didn't feel safe here, in the place she didn't know, people that she didn't familiar with. You don't know about all of this, do you? Lydia became the considerate person in the room, caught Raine's anxiousness. Raine shifted her gaze at Lydia and shook her head in dismay. I wonder what kind of place is Fulbright City? Are there many of us? Lydia asked curiously as she looked back at Raine, became impatient to hear her answer. I don't know, Raine replied sheepishly. She really didn't know if there were many guardian angels in Fulbright City. She also still had a hard time to discern this information. She? A guardian angel? What was that? Oh, Lydia's eyes slightly cast down. Decades ago, when we were still free and not being hunted, our people had roamed this realm, casting away the darkness. The darkness. Raine didn't know when this conversation would be normal. The more they talked, the more it confused her. Lydia chuckled lightly. Why do you think we are a guardian angel? She gave her a rhetorical question that, honestly, Raine couldn't have known the answer. However, instead of answered it, Lydia jumped into another matter. However, for decades ago, all the creatures started to hunt us because the essence of our power could make them stronger, and as a result, the darkness becomes darker. Lydia's eyes cast down. This realm became imbalanced. Raine totally lost it. What was the darkness? What the guardian angel was guarding? What happened to the guardian angel, whom their essence was sapped? Raine didn't deny that there were other creatures in this world, the only part which she could understand and accept. However, she was still lack of knowledge about this, and the information that she got confused her even further. On the other hand, seemingly, Lucas didn't catch Raine's strange behavior as he continued. This moment, they only see us like an object to strengthen their power, while the lycanthropes simply don't like us because our people are physically weak creature. Upon hearing the word of lycanthropes, Raine's perked up. Lycan. Her eyes shone brightly. If it was a Lycan, then they would know about Torak. However, Raine's sudden cheer, up behavior rewarded with a strange look from the 3 siblings' eyes. They looked at Raine as if she was saying something inappropriate. "Why you look so happy when you hear about Lycan?" Lydia asked. She frowned as her beautiful black eyes were assessing Raine. "I know one of Lycan," Raine said happily and sheepishly. "Who?" Lydia asked in sharp tone while leaning her body toward Raine. Her fist on her laps tightened as if she was holding something back. "His name is Torak." Until this point, Raine was still not aware about the sudden change of the atmosphere. Even the little boy stopped playing with his own hands. Only when Raine mentioned Torak's name, the three of them let out a shriek, and Lydia covered her mouth to prevent her from screaming. Raine was startled by their reaction. She didn't know why they gave her that kind of reaction. The second brother of Donovan. "Torak, Donovan," Lucas asked Raine in very serious tone, while Lydia was shifting in her seat uncomfortably. Raine nodded as reply, but her eyes became wary. She felt like she had just said something wrong and couldn't irreparable. "I don't know how you know him, but—" Lydia was fidgeting as if she remembered something unpleasant. "You better stay away from him," she warned Raine. The confusion was as thick as a fog in this living room. Both parties had many questions inside their head, but didn't know where to start. Sometime he lost his temper, but most of the time he was so kind and caring. Raine subconsciously stood up for him as she reminisced how Torak had been treating her. No one had ever done what Torak did for her. The three of them visibly grimaced by Raine's statement, and somehow this irritated her. They didn't know Torak, but why they judged him? Why? There's something wrong with that. Raine felt uncomfortable under their eyes. Yes, something totally wrong. Lydia hissed when she regained her composure after her shock. "You're not supposed to have anything to do with lycanthropes." "But why?" Raine clutched the hem of her sweater. Something wasn't right, and she knew whatever Lydia would tell her, it would surprise her with a new revelation about Torak. "Because lycanthropes are used to slaughtering our kind. Their kind is too strong and too haughty to gain more power in this way, but kill us instead to prevent the other creature to sap our essence." Lucas finished his sister explanation in one bold and direct statement. Raine was in disbelief. She couldn't accept what she heard and shook her head vigorously. "No, he will not kill other without reason." Yes, everything that Torak had done was always had a reason behind it. He wouldn't kill only for his impulsiveness, right? In truth, Raine wasn't sure about this either, as she remembered how easy Torak had killed his own kind the other day. Lucas frowned. "I don't know where you come from, but as one of our kind, you have to be careful of lycanthropes." His words laced with warning. Raine didn't like how they talk about Torak, but she wasn't dare enough to argue with them. "All right, I think this is time when we have to stop chatting and start to eat something." Lydia clapped her hand excitedly as she went to the kitchen, followed by the little boy behind her. "Raine, right?" Lucas looked at Raine in confusion. "How do you get to the desert of no return?" Not all creatures could enter that place because that place was forbidden. Not only that, the dark aura that surrounded that place was something that hard to bear. If it wasn't because Raine's voice, which calling for help, that very loud in Lucas's head earlier, he wouldn't ever know, not to mention risk his life to enter to the farthest line of the desert. "I don't know." Raine shook her head. I was inside my room and waiting for Torak when suddenly I was in the dessert. She answered him honestly. Why do you keep mentioning Torak's name? Do you really know him? Lucas thought Raine didn't mean her word before when she said she knew a Lycan, especially the cursed Lycan. Who in this realm didn't know about the curse of the 3 Donovan brothers? There is no way a guardian angel has something to do with them. The Lycan despised their kind, and the guardian angel feared them. I know him. Raine nodded. How many times that she had told him that she knew Torak before he believed her? How do you know him? Lucas's voice became deeper as he leaned his body toward Raine. Raine didn't like his gesture. She was sitting uncomfortably now. She wanted to leave this place, but didn't know where to go. She bit her lips and moved to the other side, avoiding him. Raine, how do you know him? Lucas repeated his question impatiently, wasn't aware with Raine's uneasiness. I am his mate. Raine said it. Her voice was barely a whisper as she averted her eyes, fidgeting. Impossible. Torak Donovan is cursed by the moon goddess herself, will not have mate for his entire immortal life. Suddenly Lydia emerged from the kitchen while holding a big pot that filled with soup. The white smoke wafted from it. Every single soul knew about that. Actually, Raine had heard about that also, but because she had not yet grasped the concept of mate well enough, she didn't pay attention into that matter. Right, Lucas agreed readily. You have to meet him in person to find out that you are a mate. That's how the mate bond works for lycanthropes. He recalled the information about lycanthropes that he had learned from the elder. Right, Lydia nodded. Whatever your reason is, don't associate yourself with them, Raine. Their hearts filled with darkness. There is no way you have met him, Raine. Lucas chimed in as he stood up and helped Lydia with the plates and cutleries for them. You will not be here once those Lycans saw you. But I have met him. Their reaction and statement puzzled Raine. What was wrong with them? First they said Torak was a bad person, and now they didn't believe her. Lucas and Lydia looked at each other's eyes, exchanging unexplainable look, but it was clear that they didn't trust Raine's statement. Probably you have a vivid dream about that. Lydia cleared her throat as she sauntered the room to stand beside Raine. You know, the desert of no return is a forbidden place that filled with unknown magic. Maybe it deludes you from reality. Raine wanted to say that she didn't make up stories, but their skeptical reaction only threw Raine with confusion. Now she doubted her existence. Please stop talking about Lycan. I will have a nightmare. The little boy whined. Can we eat, please? All right, let's eat, Raine. Lydia grabbed Raine's hand, ignoring her sudden tense, and brought her over to their dining table. On the dining table, there were 3 main course with 1 soup, and there was 1 extra plate that didn't match with the other 3 plates, which Raine assumed it was hers, thus she sat on the seat beside the little boy. There is no much dishes because I don't know if you will awake this early. In my calculations, you will wake up in a month. Lydia poured the soup on 4 small bowls for them. Lucas smelled the aroma of the soup and beamed in delight. You have spent all of your energy. Good think the darkness didn't find you and devoured you alive. Raine didn't give a response for that. She simply lowered her head and drank her soup. However, she took a note to ask about this at another time. After the topic of lycanthropes, their dinner conversation filled with lighter topic like how was their day. They also generously promised Raine to take her out to see the city, and Lydia would take her to buy some clothes for her tomorrow. Raine didn't want to bother them, as they had been kind enough for taking care of her when she was unconscious, but they insisted. Lydia's size was bigger and taller than her, thus her clothes wouldn't fit her. Actually, Raine didn't mind that. She remembered all her oversized and second-handed clothes that she received when she was still in orphanage. She bet Lydia's clothes would be much better than that. After the dinner ended, Raine took initiative to wash the plates. At first, Lydia rejected her suggestion, but Raine insisted she didn't want only to be a receiver of their goodwill without doing anything in return. The only problem was, there was no sink inside the house. Where should I wash this? Raine confused when she saw there was no sink in the kitchen. She had put all the dirty plates inside a wooden bucket. Just left the dirty plates. You can wash them early in the morning in the river. Lydia was busy with her younger brother, as the little boy had fallen asleep on the couch. Raine blinked her eyes a couple of times. She was puzzled with that fact. No matter how poor the house, they would have sink or at least a sluice at their home. Not to mention Lydia's family didn't look like a lower middle-class person. May I know what year is this? Raine was standing at the kitchen door while looking at Lydia's direction, who put the little boy in Lucas's embrace. What do you mean, what year? Lucas tilted his head at Raine. It had been 200 decades since the battle between the darkness and the light that put our world into chaos. And now is the talk about the darkness again. Raine chose to not ask about it further. Raine, I have prepared a room for you upstairs, the second door on the left. Lydia told Raine while she opened the door for Lucas. I have to go for a while to make a report about you, that you will stay here. Lucas and Ronnie will go home because they are not living here. It is fine if I leave you alone? Raine wanted to shake her head, but her lips escaped different words. I am fine. Lydia smiled and let Lucas and Ronnie out first. Bye, Raine. See you tomorrow. Lucas waved at her with difficulty as he hugged Ronnie in front of him. After Lucas and Ronnie stepped out of the house, Lydia closed the door while saying, I will be back soon. And with the soft sound of the door was being closed, Raine was left alone inside the house. Raine looked around at this place. Lydia's house wasn't too big, but it's nice with fireplace in the living room, in front of a big sofa that covered with white fur. This gave off an old-fashioned style. Raine sauntered the living room and opened the curtain from the window beside the fireplace. It was snowing outside. The white snow looked like cottons covered the streets, roofs, and the trees. From where Raine was standing, she could hear the wind howling. Raine felt bad because Lydia has to go alone in this kind of weather for her sake. Why didn't she report about her tomorrow morning? It wouldn't be too late, right? But, again, Raine knew nothing about this place, let alone its rule. After she tidied up the living room and made sure the dining table and the kitchen were clean, Raine was about to go upstairs and waited for Lydia inside the room that she had given to her, when she heard someone knocked on the door. Raine froze. Lydia didn't say anything about a guest. Should she open the door? Raine waited until the knocking sound stopped, hoping whoever it was, they would think no one inside the house and left. After some time, the knocking sound stopped, but instead the person behind pushed open the door instead. Raine was halfway to the second floor when a man in thick cloak, made of wool, stepped inside the room. He was so big and tall with his head almost reached the door frame. Lydia, are you home? The man scoured the living room as he took of his leather boots. Why did you leave the door unlocked? After he put aside his boots and stood up to look for Lydia, he spotted Raine was on the last step of the stairs, staring at him. Who are you? His voice was hoarse and demanding as he strode across the room. Only in 5 large steps, he had stood in front of Raine while holding her collar sweater. Who are you? Where is Lydia? He was glaring at Raine and shook her body violently. Answer me. Raine really wanted to answer him, but his tight grip around her collar made her hard of breath. Lydia went out. Raine forced her voice out her throat that sounded so weak and pitiful. What she's doing out of the house at this hour? That man sounded angrier now when he heard that, his nostril flaring when his green eyes assessed Raine's small frame, and after he decided that Raine wasn't a threat, he just released her body to drop to the ground. The moment she was released from his grip, Raine backed away, put the distance between them while rubbing her neck. Where is she going? There was no apologies from him for what he did when he asked Raine with the same tone like before. Lydia said she will report about me to the authority. Raine gulped hard. That I will stay here. You, that man frowned. What are you? That question sounded wrong, but Raine answered him anyway. I am Raine. I don't ask your name. I ask what are you? That man looked impatient now as he glanced at the door a couple of times, pacing back and forth in front of Raine as if she was a prey. One wrong move from her, he would tear her apart. Raine then remembered, but it sounded strange when she said it. A guardian angel? Those words sounded like a question rather than an answer. They said she was a guardian angel, and Raine just went along with their assumption. Fortunately, that man didn't say anything again as his tensed muscles evidently relaxed. He sat down on the sofa while intermittently glanced at Raine, who was standing at the kitchen door. The time was ticking so slow while they were waiting for Lydia. That man didn't offer Raine to sit and would let out a dangerous grunt if she moved from where she stood. Finally, the door swung opened and Lydia's figure that wrapped under a long brown overcoat came inside the room. "Dorian, you have returned?" Her face beamed brightly while she got rid the remaining snow from outside from her long black curly hair. The man named Dorian didn't waste any second when he scooped Lydia in his arms. "Why are you going outside in this hour?" He reprimanded her, but the concern in his voice couldn't be concealed. "Lucas accompany me. I am not alone." Lydia chuckled and patted the man's shoulder. "I just registered the new member of Guardian Angel." "Are you sure she is a Guardian Angel?" Dorian stared at Raine sharply. Only then Lydia realized that Raine was there. "Raine, what are you doing there? Come here." Lydia waved her hand toward the girl, but she stayed still, didn't dare to look at Dorian. "What did you do to her?" She frowned and swatted his upper hand lightly before she sauntered the room and approached Raine. "It's all right, Raine. He is Dorian Torres, my husband." Lydia introduced that man. "He probably slightly rude, but he doesn't mean it." She whispered at her ear apologetically. More or less, she could imagine how Dorian's reaction when he saw Raine inside their house. "You are home early. What happened?" Dorian supposed to come back in 2 days later. Thus, she was also surprised to see him now. There were no divider between the dining room and the living room, so when Lydia and Raine were sitting there, Lydia could still see her husband was warming himself in front of the fireplace. Those wizard hunters crossed the border again. Dorian spoke without averted his eyes from the dancing fire in the fireplace. "We had made an agreement with them, right?" Lydia was angry when she heard that. Raine could see her shoulders tensed. "An agreement like that is only a piece of paper for them," Dorian remarked begrudgingly. He removed his gauntlet and put it aside. "And those lycanthropes are really paying in the ****. Seeing this conversation was a serious matter, Lydia patted Raine's shoulder. "I will show you your room." She pointed her finger to the second floor. Raine nodded gratefully. She wanted to be alone now to discern this sudden situation and this strange place. Probably if she thought about it again, she could find the answer. Maybe she had made a forbidden move or pushed a wrong button, which resulted her being thrown into this place. Lydia led the way to the second floor and showed Raine her room. "Go inside. I'll get clean clothes for you, and tomorrow we will go buy everything that you need," Lydia said cheerfully as she went inside the other room, which Raine assumed was her room in Dorian. Raine pushed open the door and stepped inside. The moment she was inside the bedroom, the smell of citrus greeted her nose. Its scent wasn't strong enough to make her dizzy, but it felt warm and welcoming. The room that Lydia gave to her couldn't be said a big room, but it was enough to fit a small bed near the window and a small wooden cabinet next to the bed only. Raine sat on the edge of the bed because there was no chair inside the room. She looked at the heaps of snow on the windowsill, but couldn't see the street due to the glass was dewy. Lydia came after a few minutes later, brought warm purple dress in her arms and an extra blanket. With Raine's frail frame, she was afraid she would freeze in the next morning. "Here, try this." Lydia put the purple dress on Raine's laps and the extra blanket beside her. "Keep yourself warm. The night will be very cold." "Thank you, Lydia." Raine smiled softly. She was still not used to receive other people's kindness, but she definitely liked it. After what she had gone through, a little bit generosity was able to warm her heart. "You are so kind." Lydia shook her head. "Don't say something like that. There are not many are kind that left. It is a good thing that we have you here." She smiled brightly, but before Raine could ask something to her, Lydia stopped her. "You have questions? Ask me tomorrow. This already late and you have just recuperated. You need more rest." Now that Lydia mentioned it, Raine felt her body was getting heavy. She was tired. "All right," she agreed. "Thank you, Lydia." Regardless, she didn't want Raine to mention it. She still had to say it. Lydia chuckled and stood up. "If you need anything, I will be in the next room, understood?" Raine nodded, but of course she wouldn't go to her room. Dorian probably would kill her for disturbing his wife in his sleeping time. "Good night," Lydia said before she closed the door. "Good night," Raine replied. After she was alone inside the room, she locked the door and started to take off her clothes to change into the warm purple sleeping dress. She shuddered when a cold breeze blew through a crack beneath the wall. Hurriedly, she put on her sleeping dress and folded her old one before she jumped into the bed and pulled the blanket up to her head. This was still very cold. Thus, Raine used the extra blanket that Lydia had given her. She was right after all. Raine would need that. Now that she felt warm enough, her mind drifted to her last memory when she was in the apartment, and then, out of the blue, she was already in the desert. What she had done. Raine tried to think about that, but she had done nothing in particular. Neither she met a strange creature that threw her miles away from where she was. But, speaking of creature, Raine remembered something when she almost lost her consciousness. Something dark engulfed her, but it wasn't the darkness from her unconsciousness. It was something else entirely. Something that felt alive. Before Raine could proceed further about the information, the tiredness that washed over her body put her mind into a deep slumber. The faint ray of light from the window next to the bed fell on Raine's face, gently woke her up to a beautiful morning as the particles of dust floating in a stream of bleak sunlight. Raine stretched out her body and yawned sleepily. She wanted to sleep a bit longer, but remembered that she couldn't do that. Lydia had let Raine stay inside her house, and even became so nice to treat her, as if she wasn't a stranger. At the very least, Raine could do something that she could. With the last yawn, Raine opened the blanket that wrapped her body like a hot dog and welcomed the cold air. She shuddered and hugged herself while proceeding to go out of her room, walked down the stairs, and headed to the kitchen and found the cabinet as she opened it. Raine would see what food ingredients that Lydia has. Maybe she could find something for their breakfast. Inside the cabinet, Raine found brown bread, eggs, bacon, dry meat and fish, and dry vegetables like lettuce and carrot. Raine thought she could make a simple sandwich with that. But then, just now she realized, aside from sink, there was no stove also in the kitchen. This kitchen only filled with a big cabinet for them to preserve food during winter and another cabinet for plates and cutleries. At the other side, there was a simple stove with pot atop of it, where they could boil a soup, yet there was no way Raine could grill something or fry anything there. Once again, she found herself at lost with this condition. What happened exactly with all of this inconvenient? What year actually they lived for not having those kind of basic kitchen. Raine stood there absent-mindedly. She wanted to do something for Lydia in return for her kindness, but she didn't know how to do it. Biting her lower lip, Raine took the brown bread and put it on the plate as she found a jug filled with milk, but it was cold, so she needed to warm the milk inside the smaller pot. Raine was standing in front of a simple stove while holding the small pot filled with milk while thinking how she lit up the stove. First, she needed a fire lighter. Raine looked around, but couldn't see any lighter there. Why it was so hard to only make a simple breakfast? Raine frowned. "What are you doing, Raine?" Suddenly, Lydia's voice sounded from behind her. Raine whipped her head toward her direction and saw Lydia yawn widely while covering her mouth with her palm, a glistening sleepy tear on the corner of her eyes. "I want to make breakfast for you, but—" Raine waved her hand awkwardly toward the stove. "I don't know how." Seeing what the problem that Raine was facing, Lydia let out a crispy chuckle. "We don't have breakfast at home, Raine. We will always have breakfast at the Great Hall." Lydia took the small pot from Raine's hand and put it down on the table. "But thank you anyway. Maybe you can help me with lunch." "Sure," Raine mumbled as she nodded. "Now, I will get you a new dress so we can go to the Great Hall and have our breakfast there, all right?" Lydia suggested, grabbed Raine's hand, and led the way back to the second floor. Raine went to her room again, waiting for Lydia with her new clothes. The weather was so cold, even with the sun was shining so bright, Raine couldn't see the scenery behind the frosted glass. Not so long, Lydia had returned with new clothes in her hand. That was including a thick woolen cloak and several layers of clothes, also a scarf. They were in the gradient of blue color. "This will be a bit big for you, but I think it's still fine." Lydia put the clothes on top of the small cabinet beside her bed. "Thank you, Lydia." Raine said her gratitude, but the other person only waved her hand casually. "When you are done, Dorian and I will be downstairs," Lydia informed Raine. With the thought of Dorian, Raine recalled the event last night when that man's big hand wrapped around her neck. He could easily snapped her into two. Subconsciously, Raine touched her neck. It left bruises, but because the clothes that she was wearing, it would cover them just fine. Raine started to take off her sleeping dress and slipped into new clothes that Lydia had brought. It was so cold for her to stand in a kidi, even when she was in the closed room, her teeth chattering. Only when she put the last layer of clothes and wrapped her body with a thick dark blue cloak, she felt better. Immediately, Raine went downstairs and found Dorian was arranging Lydia's scarf, so it would cover her neck perfectly, preventing the cold wind brushed her skin. Lydia was so adorable when Dorian treated her that way. Her blushing cheeks slightly reddened when she saw Raine was looking at them. "Raine, come here." Lydia pushed Dorian's hand from her lightly as she gestured Raine to follow her outside. Raine walked closer to the couple and gave a faint smile at Dorian that didn't reciprocate in the same way. He grunted and took big steps to go out of the house first, leaving Raine and Lydia alone. "Is he angry with me?" Raine asked carefully. She could feel the hostility from him. Raine could understand with the misunderstanding last night, but she couldn't understand why he still treated her as if she was an enemy. Wasn't the misunderstanding have been cleared? No, he just not used to have a guest at home. Lydia explained. "It is always the two of us only. I am sorry. I became a nuisance in your house." Raine was really feel terrible for that. She didn't want to disturb them, but aside from Lydia's house, she didn't know where she could live in this strange place. Lydia realized her words and hurriedly waved her hands, gesticulating there was nothing to be worried. "It's okay. You will find your own house sooner or later," she said. "Find her own house? What does it mean?" "What do you mean with find my own house?" Raine asked while wearing Lydia's boots. They were slightly too big for her. Raine was busy with her scarf and missed the changed expression of Lydia. She grimaced when Raine asked that question. "I will tell you later," she mumbled and locked the door behind her. The snow was so soft when they stepped in the yard and gave the two of them hard time to go to the Great Hall. Raine and Lydia were having difficulty to walk as their boots kept sinking. Even the road also covered with thick snow. Once they were arrived at the Great Hall, both of them were slightly panting. The so-called Great Hall was a huge building with many intricate decorations on the surface of its big pillars. There were around hundreds of staircases to reach the hall. They needed to be extra careful when they climbed up the stairs because of the snow underneath. Raine was astounded by the scenery before her eyes. The Great Hall was approximately 300 meters long, while one long mahogany table occupied the center of the hall, with hundreds of wooden chairs along the table, and the ceiling height was pleasantly commodious. Designs of flowers were carved into the molding, and small children with wings looked down at them from every angle. The wall was painted in birch color, gave a sense of warmth with sweet smell wafted in the air. Some people had seated on the chair and chatted with the person near them, or they just ate alone before they left in a hurry. But from the interaction among the people, they seemingly knew each other. Raine had never imagined such a splendid place to eat. She was in awe by what she was seeing. Beside her, Lydia nudged her hand, drew Raine's attention to her. "Let's get our food there." Lydia pointed at the stall in the corner of the hall. The process was like when Raine's still in the orphanage. They would stand in line, waiting for their turn to get their food. Raine was standing behind Lydia with a big porcelain plate in her hand, taking some bread, bacon, and sausage along with a mug filled with milk. Afterward, she followed Lydia to the empty seat while occasionally greeted the people that they meet. Many of them would stare at Raine with curious gaze, but Lydia would dismiss them by saying she was a new member and introduce them one by one. Until they reached their seat, Raine had been introduced to 4 people. She tried to remember their names and their faces. Like I said before, there are not many of us, and to keep us united with each other, we built this great hall. Lydia explained, "The people here that you see now are the whole citizens, well less dozens people who had left or not yet come." Raine looked around. There were many people there, with approximately 300 people, but most of them are the Shadow Warrior, not a guardian angel. Lydia waved her hand to the person across them. "Hi, Aeon." She greeted him. The man has hair as dark as the night sky with black obsidian eyes. He was almost as burly as Dorian. Aeon waved back at Lydia and glanced at Raine before he resumed eating his breakfast. "He is a new member of a Shadow Warrior." Lydia whispered at her. Raine took another look at Aeon. He wasn't as scary as Dorian, she thought.